All right, we are live on YouTube, and I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021 to order, being held remotely pursuant to Executive Order 7B. All members of the board are present. The first item of business is the approval of a whole slew of minutes, starting with January 26th, 2021, running through February 8th, 2021. And I'll ask the board if there are any comments with respect to the January 26th minutes. Any comments with respect to the January 27th minutes? February 2nd. February 4th. Absent objection or comment as to any of those minutes, we'll deem them all approved by unanimous consent and move on to item 3 of the agenda, the appointment of John Reed Middle School principal. And so what I will do is first, I want to thank the search consultant, Dr. Joe Arardi, who helped us throughout this process, which started 16 months ago. Secondly, would like to thank the members of our initial steering committee, parents, the staff, the faculty that assisted in our interview process, as well as its central office. And finally, I would ask the board for somebody to please make the following motion: to accept the recommendation of the superintendent and the personnel search committee, to terminate the search committee, and to appoint Megan Ward, principal of John Reed Middle School, effective July 1st, 2021.
So moved.
Heather, second. Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yep.
Mike?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yep. Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris Hocker?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries unanimously. And congratulations to Megan Ward, our new principal at John Reed Middle School, who comes to us most recently from Staples High School in Westport. And I think I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues and everybody who has had the pleasure of meeting Megan over this process that we are extraordinarily excited to have her. Her references are glowing from within, from without, from everywhere. We are very excited to have her. I'd ask Dr. Harrison if he has any remarks before we let Ms. Ward introduce herself to our community.
Thank you very much. So early in this process, when we talked about what kind of principal we wanted for John Reed, one of the things that came up just in board member discussion was that we wanted a star, that we really, really wanted the best for our students. And we've been able to have that with Dr. Amori as our interim. And I am so delighted that we'll be able to continue to have that level of stardom with Megan Ward as our next principal. She came into the interview rounds absolutely prepared. Her love for children was obvious. Her ability to think like and make decisions like a strong instructional leader was really clear. And I am so excited to have her as part of our team. And on behalf of the entire Reading community, just want to say welcome to Megan. And July 1st seems like such a long time away, but we'll be sure to keep you nice and busy as we're preparing for your transition into this new role.
Thank you. I got a little choked up almost. I wasn't really prepared for that. Thanks, everyone. I know it's strange to say, but I really enjoyed the process and meeting everyone. And I really am so excited to get to work with all of you and do the good work that we know that kids need. And as a Barlow grad, I'm just really excited to come back to the Easton Reading community too, which is super exciting. So I just want to thank all of you for honoring the process and for choosing me and the really kind words. I'm really excited.
Thank you, Megan. Any comments from the board?
I want to first thank Dr. Arardi. It was so much fun working with him again and everybody on the committee. And I am so excited for you to be the new principal at John Reed. I think that the staff, the students, the family, the whole community is really going to benefit from your leadership.
Thank you.
Hear, hear, all around.
Yeah, welcome. We're very, very much looking forward to having you on board and excited to get going. So welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Megan. We're really excited to work with you. And as Dr. Harrison said, July 1st is right around the corner.
Yeah, thank you so much. Time flies. It'll be graduation time in no time.
Could you suggest, Chris, that she not watch the rest of this meeting?
No, because then you're gonna have to give her the money she needs.
All right.
So yeah, we'll be in a tidy 4 hours tonight. That's the.
Right.
So with that, I will turn it over to public comment. But before I do that, because we have a packed agenda, what I want to note is that public comment can be limited to 3 minutes per speaker and a maximum of 30 minutes at the top of the meeting. Anyone who doesn't have the opportunity to speak at the top of the meeting, there is a second public comment at the back of the meeting, and we'll have 3 minutes per speaker at the end for as long as it takes to get through everybody who'd like to be heard. So if there's anybody who'd like to speak for public comment, please indicate so by raising your hand in the participants window or with the reactions button, or otherwise find a way to make yourself known, please. Without all jumping at once. All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to board member comment. Anybody? All right, I will
read, Chris, I was going to read a Dr. Seuss book, but I'll pass on that in the interest of time.
Thank you, Chris. I had a couple of things that I wanted to note tonight. First, on behalf of our Reading School District, a warm thank you to the Weston Westport Health District for including us in their vaccine clinics that I know that Megan is going to be present for in the next couple of weeks. They have been kind enough to organize a clinic that works for Weston and Westport and Easton, who are members of that health district, and also invited Reading and Region 9 to join in those clinics, which are going to start getting some of our faculty and staff vaccinated as soon as tomorrow afternoon, which will be wonderful. Secondly, I just wanted to thank Maria Frederick at the middle school for inviting me and a number of other people to come read today for Read Across America Day, which was fun in its own right, but particularly fulfilling, as I think it was the first time I was in a building that was filled with students in what feels like a year. And it was more energizing than I would have expected. So I very much appreciate the opportunity. So if there's no further board comment.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You have mentioned something many, many times in town meetings and budget meetings, and I think I want to repeat what you've said as people are listening to the budget. There's been a lot of comparison lately between our budget here in Reading and other Durg A budgets. There's always a lot of comparison to that. And if you look at how budgets are built in other towns, their strategies are very different across the Durg. Some towns include their teacher pensions in the Board of Selectmen's budget, etc. So what that does, it lowers their, I'm going to say this slowly so people understand, it lowers the per pupil expenditure cost, which means you have to reach a lower threshold before you get money back in the excess cost sharing for special ed kids that have to be outplaced and things like that. So if you were looking at the town budget as a whole and not siloed into, like we traditionally do it, like the Board of Selectmen's budget and our budget, and nothing can be over 3%, then it would make sense to put everything that we possibly could over in that budget so that we would, as a town, get more money back in the excess cost sharing. So I just wanted to put that out there right at the front. It's a win-win for everybody. It's not how we do it, and I think it should be.
Thank you. Heather, any other board member comment? If there is not, then we'll move on to the Assistant Superintendent's report. Dr. Pearson-Ugal.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity just to provide some information to the board and to the community regarding a familiar assessment that's being administered this year in a different manner. The NWEA assessment is being administered to students in grades 5, 6, and 7, and 8 in March this year. We would typically do it at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and for students receiving intervention at the mid-year point. This year, we've chosen to administer it in March in order to provide more formative information about our students, so that we have a larger window to provide intervention. And this is a standardized measure. The administration is outside of the normal window for the number of instructional weeks that need to pass. So therefore, it's a non-standard administration. So I'm calling your attention to this because once the students receive the scores and we send those score reports home to families, it will be really not a valid type of measure to compare apples to apples. This is not the time of the year that we typically administer, and we have not allowed enough weeks to pass in order to use the norms. However, rather than using lower winter norms, which would increase our students' performance, we're going to use spring norms, which will depress the numbers. And that's really quite intentional. We want to cast a wider net so that we can draw more students into support and provide both extra support and also possibly enrichment as needed. So we will be using those spring norms on this assessment.
Will students be assessed if they're in cohort C and decline to come into the building?
The school will reach out to those families, certainly where students are in cohort C. And I believe on this assessment, we have a secure site for the students to be able to take the assessment both remotely as well as in person, although I want to double check on that. I see Dr. Amori. I'm not sure that I see Mrs. Wallen, who is usually in charge of such things. Dr. Amori, do you recall whether the cohort C students can take it at home?
I think students can. Mrs. Wallen can't be with us tonight, but yeah, I think that is the case. Yep.
And when we look at that data, are we going to be able to divide between those students who are in cohort C and not to see if there's any additional gaps?
We will.
Any questions in this report from the board? All right. Thank you, Stephanie. On to building administrative reports. We can start with RES.
Good evening, everybody. I cannot believe it's March. I just wrote a letter to our families yesterday in our Tuesday Newsday, and it's hard to believe. And I don't know about many of you, but my eyes probably look like I didn't sleep last night because I didn't. It certainly came in like a lion last night with those crazy winds. So I hope everyone's home and everybody's well. So this week in our board report, you'll see our Fine and Practical Arts has weighed in and has given you sort of a snapshot of what's going on in the building. And hopefully you had a chance to take a look at the many wonderful things going on. And right there where Chris just stopped, it says a sneak peek at the RES Has Heart. Not only is that in progress, but it's most recently finished. And it's a beautiful addition to, this is our front lobby as you're walking in and you take a left as if you're going towards the cafeteria and big gym. Mimi Weiss, and thank you to the PTA, helped to make all of this happen. So all the children have a little square heart. Really bringing about the sharing our emotions and really meeting kids where they're at on a social emotional level. And she's done a beautiful job. So maybe we'll snap a picture of that and put it in our next month's edition since she just wrapped that up. So this week, as Chris mentioned, I'm glad that you guys got to head on down to John Reed. We too, Joe and I are excited to be joining some classrooms to be guest readers ourselves. It's always fun. And so in looking at our Read Across America activities for this week, we've had a team of teachers come together and really think about what our children are going to benefit from the most when we talk about Read Across America and really engaging kids in this exciting experience. And so they thought long and hard about the diverse themes and diverse books across America. And we thought about how we pull in, a lot of the teachers are doing the social emotional goals for this year, and really, again, finding the children socially and emotionally where they're at. A lot of really rich conversations around self-confidence, empathy, inclusiveness, cultural compassion and activism. And so I'm excited. I know Joe read today. I'm excited to join a classroom and talk a little bit about activism and speaking up for ourselves this coming Friday. And the kids have really been doing accompanying activities across the grade levels, as well as really engaging in some rich, rich conversations. So a huge thank you to our team of teachers who came together and really tried to think outside the box and bringing our school together for this really what we're calling a week-long activity. So we're excited to see what's still to come tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. And that's it for tonight. I will take questions if there are any about the report.
Thank you, Natalie. Any questions for Ms. Hammond tonight?
It's not a question, it's just a comment that I really could sense the passion of Mimi Weiss through her portion of that report, and her passion for students' art and even the quality of the art, I think is just so beautiful. And so I just wanted to, those reports have come such a long way, Natalie, since you've started. I don't know if you could compare to what they were before you to what we have now. I think it really is a big accomplishment, and I really to highlight what Mimi put together there, I think is really a great thing.
Thank you so much. I do agree. They put a lot of effort and energy into this, and when you say the word passion, I think that's RES's middle name. So there's certainly that passion, that enthusiasm and excitement for the teaching and learning. So thank you for recognizing that, Colleen.
Yeah, I want to echo what Colleen said, and also say, especially in this year where we're not going into the school for International Day and concerts and all the things that we normally get to go in and see, that these snapshots are really helpful for us. So thank you, and more of this, please.
Absolutely.
I also want to shout out the PTA because I know that they worked really hard.
They sure did.
Yep.
They sure did. Yep. We received a grant from them to help get that Mimi's program going. So absolutely.
If there are no other questions or comments, we'll go on to John Reed, Dr. Amori, and thank you, Natalie.
You bet. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is a, you see our report is rather brief. And as I was thinking about what to say, listening to my esteemed colleague, I thought I want to say that I have everything to share and nothing to share somehow at the same time, if that makes sense, which it doesn't. So I will explain. Today was a very exciting day at John Reed. As Chris mentioned earlier, we had, all of our mystery readers came in. Chris was there, and Julie Pemberton was there, and Stephanie came, and Clarence and Rydell, and it was just so exciting to have people come into the building. I think for them to get a sense of, I use the word normalcy, it just felt, and I was only here 1 year, of course, but it felt normal again. Of course we were masked and we were distanced, but it just there was a vibe in the building, and our teachers dressed up as their favorite book characters. I think Meg Rooney is on here. If you could have seen her Pippi Longstocking today, I mean, she really nailed it. She had the braids all curled up and everything. But that's what John Reed is all about. And that excitement, coming together about the most important thing we teach, and instill, a love of reading. Well, it was just a really great day at John Reed. And then I stayed a little bit later, after all the kids went home, but actually they didn't go home because now we have clubs after school. So when you come into the building now, there's a wonderful poster, that our secretaries made, on their own. And it says, what's meeting today? And they made little signs for each of the clubs that are going to meet. And, and each day they change it. And it's just a welcoming way to reaffirm that we're carrying on. We're continuing to do what we do best. And that is, address the whole child and make our children as connected, to the building as possible. As I put in my letter to parents last weekend, if they haven't yet, make sure your child signs up for something, 1 or 2 clubs. The art club came down, at the end of the day today. They were so excited. It was 5 o'clock at the end of the day. I'm exhausted. They're like jumping around. Oh, Dr. Mori, let me show you what we did in art club, that kind of thing. So that's really what's happening. You can see on the report there what's going on throughout the month. We have so many wonderful offerings, and our teachers do such a great job in finding ways to help our kids connect. So that is what I wanted to share, mostly about what's happening at John Reed. And I will also very briefly mention that, in terms of professional development, we have 3 half-day sessions left. And in March, Darlene Rowan has worked really hard on bringing the Welcoming Schools organization to us. Our teachers will be trained by Welcoming Schools. I believe we got this recommendation from our colleagues over at Helen Keller, and they're going to help us. They're going to do a workshop on creating inclusive communities, particularly for our LGBTQ population. Our staff has already completed several surveys, so that the presenters will be really in tune with what we need, and we're really looking forward to that. And in the remaining 2 months, we hope to provide a bit of a cornucopia. I've asked teachers for their interests and what they would really like to work on, shares a couple of possible workshops with them, and I'm holding out, on the money and hoping they don't take it back from us, right? Clarence, I know you're listening. We want to provide as much PD as possible for our teachers, because I know a lot, the research always shows us that the best PD sweet spot is a combination of what teachers really want, to further their own learning and what they know their kids need ultimately, and also what the district's, goals are. And when you can combine those two things, you have a really rich PD program. And we hope to offer that for the remaining 3 sessions for our teachers. And that is my report for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amori. Questions, comments from the board?
Just a personal thank you for the extracurricular. My daughter is so excited for these clubs that she's attending homework club.
I know.
She's so excited to have something to do, because we're not letting her do anything that's out. We feel comfortable with her being in the school because of the safety protocols, and we're not letting her do anything else. So she is taking full advantage of any opportunity, including homework club. So
thank you.
I have a question about the Welcoming Schools.
Yes.
So is that the same one that Dana Ponte was talking about at Helen Keller?
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're doing that. That's great.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
There are no other questions or comments for Dr. Amori. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to committee charges and assignments, which is partially a carryover from last month. If you recall, we charged/recharged a number of our standing committees. And as part of that, there's an obligation to make appointments in a public setting at a meeting. And so I want to make some mostly reappointments and then also address the one committee charge that we didn't address before. So starting with the Communications Committee, appointed our Colleen Pilato and Heather Whaley. For the Curriculum Committee, appointed are Heather Whaley and John Riley. And as parent representatives, reappointed is Lisa Goldstein and Carolyn Baker, and appointed is Martine King, replacing Monica Robinson. On the Long Range Planning Committee, appointed are myself and John Riley. For the Reading Specific Policy Committee, appointed are myself and John Riley. For the Structure and Ways and Working Committee, appointed are myself and Colleen Pilato. And for the Facilities Committee, I will call up the charge that we passed on last month because we wanted to make sure that Mike Hoffman was available to review and comment. And so the question at this point would be for a motion to approve this as the charge of the Facilities Committee or make other changes or recommendations.
Hey, Chris, I'm looking at it right now. I'm a little
Yep.
handicapped because I have to be on my phone tonight, but I certainly accept the challenge to be on the committee.
For your benefit, anybody else who has difficulty reading the screen, I'll read the purpose out loud just to make sure that it's copacetic for everybody. The Reading Board of Education Facilities Committee shall work with the Director of Finance and Operations and head custodians to ensure that the buildings, grounds, and associated facilities are maintained properly, and to identify cost-effective improvements in order to protect the town's investment in school facilities. The committee shall make regular updates to the board and shall update and present a recommended capital plan for board approval no less than annually. And then there's a section on structure, which has at least 2 members of the board are appointed in addition to other folks.
So that sounds great. Love to have another member join as well. Did anybody volunteer?
Chris Hocker just volunteered, but first let's take the charge. Is there a motion to approve the Facilities Committee charge?
Motion to approve.
Mike, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Chris. Any discussion? Hearing none, calling the question quickly. Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Ah,
Sounded like
That's a
yes.
yes, I'm
Mike?
sorry. I dropped my phone.
Mike?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 7-0. And as board representatives, I'll appoint Mike and Chris Hawker.
Thank
And
you.
that concludes that item. And that moves us on to the main event, which is the 2021-2022 operating and capital budgets. And what I want to do, the goal tonight is to bottom out on a number and to vote to adopt an operating budget number for the next fiscal year. And as we get into that, I want to introduce Dr. Harrison and Mr. Zachary to kind of give us an update as to where it is we are with various edits that have been made since our discussions in February and any new developments over the course of the month since we've been together to discuss this topic.
Thank you. I'll get us started and then hand off to Clarence so that he could give us share a screen and give us a picture of where we are currently. So since our last meeting, we had great discussion at the last budget workshop talking about some of the things that we really wanted to prioritize based on the needs that were discussed over the course of several meetings. And we identified a number of areas and potential areas of savings through cuts that we can make based on the initial proposed budget. Over the last several days, through lots of conversations with our central office administrators and also our building administrators, Clarence made sure that we identified all those areas, and then in preparation for tonight's conversation, created a process so that as we're talking about other areas of savings that we could sort of live update in real time and kind of see where we are. So I'm going to hand off to Clarence so that he could talk about those areas of where we are so far.
Good evening. Chris, do you mind if I can share my screen?
You should be able to, Clarence.
Okay. Let's see, screen share. Can everyone see that? So basically, this is our scenario as of our last meeting, which I think was approximately February 18th. We had a 7.72% variance. Let me make this a little smaller so you can see it all on one screen. Bear with me 1 second. So I'm going to show you some additional changes that we made. All right, that's much better. So this included the addition of the 2 stop loss for the medical insurance, which was a major driver in the increase from what our original proposal was. We also had some changes regarding, we talked about adding the Junior Bridges program. So that's also embedded in this number of the 7.2. So you had 3 things added, three changes which added to the budget. You had medical insurance, Junior Bridges para, and a Junior Bridges sped teacher. So subsequent to that, we had some other discussions from that meeting and subsequent to the meeting where we've added some additional, mostly reductions, but 1 addition. So I'm just gonna pop this open here so you can see everything that we've done so far. So on the far left, you'll see a description of what we did. Next column will be the school, the function, the object code, the amount. Red negative means we've taken it out of the budget. Black positive means we've added to the budget. The next column shows what the fiscal year, this current year's budget is. And the column that says FY 21-22 shows you what the budget means after that reduction or addition. The dollar amount variance change and then the percentage change. So we're starting the evening off and get 7.72% increase. And if we can go through these individually, or we can just cut to the chase. And right now we're down at a 6.73% increase based on the changes that we've made to date. And I'm sure through the course of this evening, as we do other things, I can add on, and this list will roll through and sort of update as we go. So if you want to talk about some of the things we've already reduced, that's fine. Or if you just go straight into finding some.
I think if you walk us through what each of the lines represent, that'll help everybody understand and make sure that what they think is out has been captured.
All right. So the first one, remove proposed new Learning Commons para. There was in the original budget, there was a para for the Learning Commons at John Reed Middle School. That's been removed. That was worth $18,000. So you see the $18,000 amount removed. There was a removal of math curriculum work at John Reed Middle. That was in the summer. That was $8,800. There was also some professional development that was removed in the summer.
And was that was removed at the request of Dr.
Yes.
Pearson-Ugal or the building
Clarify.
administration?
It was showing up in two places. So
Okay.
that work is still in my tab of the budget, but it was also in error placed at the building.
So it had been double booked and it's a correction.
Yes, correct. It had been double booked. There was a reduction in the amount of Chromebooks requested. It went from 99 down to 39. So that was a reduction of $15,000 at John Reed Middle School. There was a reduction in the lawn care per discussion with the town. I left a slight amount in there because lawn care will include snow removal and stuff like that. So I left $1,500 in there, but the reduction for John Reed was $8,700. Then we have some reductions in salary due to retirement. So this is, we have an existing employee we know who's retiring. Then the delta between the new employee's projected salary is this reduced cost of $45,623. That particular employee had longevity, so there's a reduction in longevity account at the 114. That particular employee is scheduled to do some summer work, so there's also a reduction in the summer work category. And that reduction reflects the offset between the new hire daily rate and the retired person. The next one is a secretary that's split between John Reed and RES. This one is somewhat unique because the secretary is actually split 4 ways. The secretary is 50% is Easton, 50% is Reading. So the Reading portion is split another half for the 2 schools. So this represents the 25% of the individual salary that John Reed is responsible for. You'll see it repeated again just below it. So it's the same person, but we have to do their longevity and do the 25%. So that total amount is the sum of those 2 quarters, if that makes sense. So
Clarence, let me just clarify a little bit. So that's actually not, that position is not currently shared between the 2 districts. One of the things that that we're proposing to do because of this retirement is to do a little bit of reconfiguring so that going forward, that's a shared position. So in the future, our proposal would be that it's a shared position between Easton and Reading, and that is specifically for the one of the SPED secretaries whose responsibilities currently right now are only in Reading, but the proposal would be going forward, we would, since we are sharing between the districts a SPED director, that we could share one secretary to work with that same director in both districts.
And so what I'm looking at is the retirement of somebody in Reading here. Is the partial built back in anywhere?
yes, the partial, that net change in salary of 44,926 is a reduction because the 25% for Reading Elementary and the 25% John Reed are what's reflected in the budget, but the net savings is the 44,926.
Okay, so that's all in replacing a full retirement with a half. The net savings is the 45-ish thousand.
Correct. Moving along, there is another retirement at RES. Once again, that's the delta between top of the pay scale to a new teacher. That being top of pay scale is also a longevity payment that comes off the board. That's the $850. RES is also reducing some Chromebooks for $1,530. We had $80,000 in the budget for the new math program. We've now finalized that negotiation. So that payment reflects the payment amount for next fiscal year, which would be the second payment of 3. So that is the delta between the 80 and what we're actually paying. There's also a reduction in desired math software because we think some of those things these other programs we're doing is encompassed in the new math program. So it's somewhat redundant. So we remove that. There's 2 clubs were removed from RES. So that's the student activity account. And there were some supplies for those clubs, which is the next line, 1126,613 supplies to those clubs. We have an increase of $90,000 in not yet finalized sped out placements. There was also a removal of the post new custodian RES, and there's also the reduction in the lawn care at RES. And like I said, I left 1,500 in there, but the net delta is 18.9, which brings us to a 1.5 million increase right now, or 6.73%, 73%. So we've shaved just slight over 1% off since the last meeting.
And that's without touching health insurance, which is sitting there at 2 stop losses as sort of a large nut in all of this.
Correct.
Okay. Right. Does anybody have any questions about what Clarence just walked through with respect to reductions made and how we got there?
I do.
Go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit more about the $90,000 increase in not yet finalized sped out placements? Explain that if you could.
Since our last meeting, we've gotten better clarity about some outplacements, and based on that greater clarity, we need to increase the budget. I can defer to Jen Del Conte to give you more detail, but since the last meeting, there's been more information that's come in, which typically what happens, more information comes in after the fact. So since we had that new information, we had to increase the budget to reflect that new information. If you want, I can turn to Jen to give you more clarity.
What I'd like to do is hold off on Jen talking about that, because I think that warrants a bit of a substantive discussion to understand, and see if there's any other clarifying questions first from Chris or anybody else, and then we can jump into that. There may not be. Any other board members have clarifying questions or with
the
respect?
math program contract payment, I'm sure you said it, but the reduction of that, does that mean we're counting 1, 3? Where does 2 go?
So originally we had the entire amount in this year's budget of $80,000.
Okay,
next year's budget for $80,000. So for next year, actually, it's going to be 39 and change. So that reduction is showing the delta between the 80 and what we're actually paying in next year's budget.
All right, thank you.
I have a question. So I think that I remember the special services secretaries being 2.5 positions to equal a full secretary. So is that factored in to the retirement?
So currently our secretaries for SPED in Reading, we have two FTEs. So there are 2 full-time secretaries, and this will reduce us to 1.5.
So in reality, there's still going to be 2 FTEs, but now that 0.5 is now being covered by Easton. So you're still going to have 2 physical bodies, but now Easton's covering half the cost of one of those individuals.
Does that help, Colleen?
I mean, can I show you in the budget where I got that information?
Yeah. Call
So
out where are you looking?
Okay, so I am in 23, 1200, 135. That's the new location. Last year it was 112.
Yep.
So Colleen, if you go to that same location in RES's budget, you'll see the other 0.5. So the way that it's broken out, so 0.5 goes to John Reed, and the other 0.5 for both secretaries goes to Reading Elementary.
So Colleen, so next year's budget, instead of saying 0.5, it'll say 0.25 for one of them and 0.5 for the other, because the 0.5 we're shaving off. Now Easton's picking up the cost.
Okay. All right. And all of that, what you just said, is factored into the new number.
Yes.
Okay.
other clarifying questions on these revisions? If there are not, I think we should spend a few minutes talking about not yet finalized outplacements in special ed. And I'll ask Jen to kind of walk us through A, what that means, and B, sort of her process and comfort level with where the number is right now, so that we can kind of say, let's get a sense of how much risk is involved in that number. And as I introduced Jen, I do also want to thank her publicly for the tremendous responsiveness to questions that she has had from, at all days of the week and at all hours. If I'm confused about something, I send an email and 2 hours later I get a spreadsheet. So very much appreciated. But Jen, if you could help inform us all as to what not yet finalized outplacements is and how we sort of arrive at that, and how comfortable we should feel with the numbers.
Sure. So the first thing I do want to talk about is how the budget line, what covers this budget line. So really there are 5 ways that out of district placements come about. And I think that's very important for us to think about. And there are certain variables we can control, and there are certain variables we can't control. So the first thing is student in the outplacement. When we look at settlement, that is something that we can control, because typically when we do settlements, we know what the cost is for the current year and possibly for the next 2 years. So that really is a cost that we can predict. When we talk about the finalized placements, these are typically placements that the PPT places students in, because we have exhausted our continuum and we know that after trying everything, we cannot support this child. So again, that's a cost that we can pretty much predict. There are really other costs that we cannot predict. One is when a family moves into the district, and sometimes the previous district has already outplaced that child. So typically we are left with, we have to continue to support that child. So that is something that we cannot predict in the budget, when families move in and what their needs are. We also have the magnet schools. So, we have the lottery, which I think is a fantastic opportunity where Reading families can choose to go to the magnet school. They do not, that is open to students with disabilities and students without disabilities. So if a student with a disability gets placed or gets selected to go to the magnet school, we are still responsible for incurring that cost. So for example, if a student with an IEP goes to the magnet school and they need speech, or they need a para, or they need resource room, that town that is providing those services will bill back Reading. So when we are aware of some student that may go to the magnet program, we have to yet factor in that we will be getting billed for those services. So again, that's another variable that we cannot control. So though I just wanted to point out that we also have PPT meetings that we have not yet convened at this time. So we anticipate which students we know that we can support and not support. So that's why that not yet finalized is such a wild card. As much as we try our darnest to predict, like I just mentioned, there's certain things we cannot predict. The magnet school lottery is one, who gets accepted and who doesn't. And the second is who moves into the district that may already have an out-of-district placement. We also had families that have moved in, and we know right from the get-go that no matter what supports we put in place, we cannot support that child because of the resources that we currently have. So that's why that number is constantly changing, hopefully by a small amount. But again, since Chris, since you and I have spoken and you had asked for the budget information, 2 days later, we came across new information, and that's why that number changed.
And so it's not a contingency so much as a best estimate based on what the needs of the students that are currently enrolled is.
That is correct. And I will say that we have been working very closely with our current out-of-district placements to have those conversations about who can return to district. And I do know that we are probably going to be having hopefully some positive conversation with some of those placements. But again, that's a process too. So that usually involves the principal, that usually involves the current staff and saying, we have something to celebrate. This kid's doing fantastic and now they're ready to return to Reading. But we also have to make sure that we have the supports in place. So I'm hopeful that some of these conversations will be positive.
At what point in the calendar year are these placements typically finalized?
It depends on when the child was initially classified. We do what's called anniversary PPTs as opposed to calendar PPTs. Other states do calendar PPTs. So they typically every January in other states, they would start the PPT process. We do it based on when that child been identified. So if you were identified in October, we have to plan until the following October. So one of the things that Jen Henkler and I have been trying to do is to try to push up the kids that are out of district earlier so that we can coincide it with the budget time. But we can't make it too early in a sense that, so like here's a perfect example is that we did a couple of PPT meetings where we thought the student may go out, but we convened the PPT meeting early. And then we realized, hey, we actually can support this student. So we've been really trying to coincide the PPTs for the out of district placement with the budget cycle so that we could have a tighter alignment of our predictions.
Helpful. Mike, did you have a question?
Yes, and this is kind of a repeat of your question. I just want to confirm, not yet finalized outplacement is not something that you want to put into the budget just in case somebody moves in, but it is definitely a reaction to a situation that you're working on right now, right?
We have identified students with specific dollars, and typically because the out of district placement cost, so to speak, it varies anywhere from, I would say, from the low 60s to over 100,000. So typically when I look at that out of district line, I tend to use the CES or at Advance as the starting point because they tend to be right in the middle. And then, of course, we look at the excess cost, but for every out of district not yet finalized, I have a student that I have attached to that.
And the second question is, this outplacement would not be affected by whether BASIS program is in the budget or out of the budget. You're kind of thinking it's going to happen either way.
Chris, do you mind sharing your screen with me for a minute? I actually, believe it or not, I actually made a little chart that I think
you should be able to share now, Jen.
And okay, so no, that's not what I wanted to show. Hang on a minute, let me if I can find my my little chart. I know that I am. Let me see. Give me 1 minute. I lost my my little chart. I have to find it again.
Jen, is the one we were talking about earlier?
Here it is. I have it right here. So what I need to do is to share my screen. I think I'm going to need a little help. I'm not. Okay, so you have to ignore the water in the background. Here you go. So basically what this is, Chris, I think what I did was the information that you had asked me, I kind of combined a lot of the information. I thought this would be very helpful for our discussion here. So when you look at the not yet finalized placement for John Reed, which you see the number 1 on the top, that is actually the student that I have attached to that cost. So again, I think we had talked about earlier that we predict that we, with the Junior Bridge program, we have earmarked or identified about 7 students. Had we not considered this program, that number would be 8 for the not yet finalized placements. So you see, that's why the John Reed number is at 70,000. So when you look at the not yet finalized for RES, and you see the number 4, so there are 4 students that we have identified that we cannot support at RES. And again, it could be for one of the reasons that I specified earlier. They could be, they have moved in magnet schools where we cannot support them here. So that's where those numbers are coming into play. So regardless of the continuum that we are building, there are 5 students between RES and John Reed that we feel we cannot support.
Thank you.
Chris, I just had a question for Jen.
Yep, go ahead.
And apologies if I'm repeating, but I'm just trying to better get my head around this. So in the most recent outplacement guesstimate, we're in a scenario where we do have the support structure and within district to support this student, but AIS may not have that structure. But obviously we would be responsible for the cost to help AIS achieve that. Am I understanding that correctly?
This has to do with nexus. So because the magnet school attracts, neighboring communities. So anything that is any IEP based services will always be billed back to the home district. This is not a new practice. This is something that that's been in play, and we have sent students with IEPs to the magnet school, and sometimes after a year or two they realize that Reading Elementary or John Reed has a program that supports them. So again, I was made aware recently that of several students again who could be moving in magnet school and so forth. So I have to plan for them. Because I think the worst thing I can do is to come back to the board and say, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. So I try to make sure that we budget appropriately for these students.
So when we're looking at those expenses, do they come up in the tuition private school line, the 563, or are they under magnet?
Typically, what we do is the finalized, the ones that we know of end up, like for example, any settlements that we have end up in our known line. We don't have a separate line for settlements. We include them into our finalized.
Is that the 563 line? Which line is that in the budget?
It's 563, Chris.
Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? You said that when someone moves into the district, if they've been outplaced previously, we continue that. Is that even if we can meet their needs here?
We have to honor the IEP for students that are coming into the district to the greatest extent possible for a period of time until we can convene the meeting. It is extremely difficult for us to say we are going to take a child from an out-of-district placement and bring them into the district within 30 days. They would say, well, you don't know the child. So in order to me, special ed, and like all education, we are a people business. We have to build trust. The parents have to come in. They have to see the programs and the supports we offer before they bring their child in. If we don't work to establish that trust, then we are talking about getting attorneys involved, and then it becomes a whole different scenario. So typically when students are outplaced by another district, we tend to maintain that placement while trying to work with the families to get them back into Reading in the process.
One last question on the magnet school. When we are in a situation where their billing is back, doesn't the PPT originate in Reading in those situations, and wouldn't we have some control over what the program is?
We are responsible for convening that child's annual review, and we are responsible for developing an IEP for that child. Typically, another district like the magnet school will review the IEP and they will implement the services. If they feel that the child needs more or less services, they will typically come back and ask the PPT to convene to discuss their concerns or questions.
Are there any other questions with respect to either the not yet finalized outplacements or outplacements in general at this point?
Just out of curiosity, are any of these, does any of this affect the assumption of the excess cost reimbursement number?
I gave Chris my excess cost reimbursement. Reading, I think we are, Clarence, maybe you can help me out. I think we're at about 108 or 109,000 right now. And last year we were only able to claim, I believe, 2 or 3 students. So we really aren't able to claim. We don't get as much back as we anticipate. But it is something we fill out the form, we fill out the excess cost sheets every year. But our
I just wondered if when you make a budget adjustment for cost, whether, and it may not even apply, that's what I'm asking.
Right. If we're adding 90,000, are we crediting ourselves 6 for money that's coming back? And
No, we're not, because you got to get to the 4.5 times and you don't know whether you're going to get to the 4.5 times. So you'd be booking a credit you may not know whether you're going to get or not.
Okay.
yeah, because I don't think any of these not yet finalized are so clearly above and beyond the threshold that it would be worth sort of making that estimation.
Yeah, that's sort of what I expected to hear, but I just wanted to cover that along. Okay.
Mhm.
And
I think if the
just so
number,
that we're
Chris,
clear, when we're looking at the
sorry, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say, if the number is 90,000, then we wouldn't be getting anything back. If it actually cost us 90 for the particular case or particular student, we wouldn't be getting anything back on that.
Unless we were able to move everything possible out of our budget and carry it by the town and bring down the per pupil
Right.
expenditure.
If you could lower the floor, theoretically, there's conversation,
Yeah,
but
we could
that's
get
not
more.
going to change where we land tonight.
Yeah, right.
But the only difference, Mike, is the 90,000 you're assuming is tied to one student, as opposed to moving where any individual case might be, which might move the threshold, but it doesn't sound
Right.
like it does. But just so that we're abundantly clear, what we're looking at in Clarence's working document tonight is all known outplacements, all not yet finalized outplacements. It accounts for junior bridges. So all of our students are accounted for in, the most reasonable expectations that we can have as of this moment on March 2nd for special ed, basically.
It's being added to the existing total. So if you, in your budget books, if you go to 1,200 for either school and go to 563, you will see the outplacements which were confirmed and the not yet finalized. That's how you get to the total amount for the 563 account.
Right. And when we started this process in January, there was discussion about possible outplacements that were never added to the budget because it was an add them to the budget or add junior bridges. We added junior bridges, so we never added those, and they don't have to come out. Is the
Correct.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions or concerns related to special ed generally and the budget?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
I think they're in the spreadsheet. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so for OT, that's occupational therapy.
Colleen, which school first, please?
Okay. Great question. I have written down here that it was 24, but sometimes my notes don't exclude 23. Let's use 24 as the example, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
So when we say there's a need for constellation, and then also in addition, our own OT, we my question is, I just want to confirm that we do in fact need both, and one is not a leftover in any way from a previous budget.
I can speak to that, Colleen.
Yeah.
First of all, in Reading Elementary School, we do have our own in-house OT person, and we do have our own BCBA at Reading Elementary. Both are fantastic. But given the intensity of the student, there is spillover in the OT caseload. So Constellation picks up the excess students on that caseload. At John Reed Middle School, we do not have our in-house BCBA, and we do not have an in-house OT. So Constellation is providing both the BCBA and the OT for John Reed because we do not have a staff person at John Reed.
Okay, thank you.
Is the 0.2 SLP presumed to be a third-party servicer in the budget at this point?
Could you repeat that, please?
There was a 0.2 speech language pathologist that we had talked about as being a requested add to meet needs. And last we talked, I think it was supposed to be contracted out. I just wanted to confirm that that's still the case and understand where that is.
I believe our plan is to advertise first. I mean, that would be a contractual issue because the speech and language people are part of the teacher's bargaining unit. So we would, of course, advertise first. We anticipate it will be a challenge to find somebody, less than full time. But I do know that Constellation is, and we have associates, to name another, our agencies that do provide speech and language support.
Thank you.
So the credit from the IDEA grant, so now I'm 24, 1200, 112. The credit for the IDEA grant, that used to make sense because 112 was populated with those positions. We're still planning on that 45,000?
Yes,
grant?
it's just the 112's just been moved to the 135, so we can move the credit 135. We just haven't done it in the book, so it's
Okay.
we apply it's still
Okay.
going to get netted out of the salary line. So as you notice that those 112s say the star 135, so we just need to move the credit to 135. We just haven't adjusted the grants yet.
Okay. And this is where, now that we're talking about 135, this is what you're talking about with that. If the two schools combined have 2 FTEs right now, that's what's going down to, what was it? 135?
That's correct. Like I get you on my budget right now, I'm looking, it says 0.25 special service secretary and a 0.5.
Okay.
Yours says 0.5, 0.5.
Okay. Got it.
Any other SPED questions? Okay, if there are not.
Chris, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go faster than I do. So in Clarence's list today, there is a reduction in Chromebooks. Is that from all areas where Chromebooks might be, or is it just from a specific Chromebook line? So the reason I'm asking is that there are Chromebooks listed in 23, 1200, 732.
It's from specific lines. So the lines, I know I'm not sharing my screen, but it's for 23, function 225, object 732 for 15,000. And then it's in location 24, 1115, object code 731 for 1,530. So it's 2 specific accounts and 2 specific functions.
Okay. I'm actually looking up my note here and it's no longer there. So
It's no longer listed in the budget, zeroed out. So I'm wondering if it moved.
It probably moved because a lot of the technology stuff we moved around. So most of the technology now is either in 732 or 731, depending. So it might
Okay.
have moved from the original.
Okay, and any possible trimming that was possible has already been trimmed?
Yes, based on input from the building leaders.
Okay. Okay.
And when it comes to that and sort of technology and infrastructure purchases, is there anything that can be realistically deferred for 12 months? Or is all of this at broken to replace stage?
So, the one area, so we had a substantive conversation related to the Chromebooks at both schools. And, so we've been really thinking about Chromebooks more as consumables because the life cycle is about 4 years. So in thinking about, wanting to have a more robust and comprehensive technology plan, once we have our director of technology in place, with that being the goal, we still want to make sure that we are all set to go at the beginning of the school year. So the number that we have of Chromebooks is really trimmed down to represent that. We did have some discussion at RES about the boards, the smart boards or Promethean boards, and just needing to replace. So when we're talking about kind of a bigger picture, like what's our long-term direction going forward, I think that's a bigger conversation. But right now, what's represented in the budget are some of the needs that are really pressing at RES related to those smart boards for next year, and teachers needing to use that. One of the questions that I had of them, and this year has been a different kind of year, so I haven't spent as much time in classrooms as I would have wanted to. I said, are teachers using the smart technology, or are they using it as a projector, right? Because if it's being used as a projector, that's a very different cost. And in talking with Joe and with Natalie, they confirmed that that it is a real necessity for many of the teachers that where they are needing to really be replaced as quickly as possible. And Natalie and Joe, jump in if I am missing anything as part of that conversation, or if you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, I can jump in here. Since the last time we had this conversation at the board meeting in February, 3 more of our projectors and or smart boards are no longer functioning. One as early as today, there was one yesterday. And it's really, I know Rydell has had conversations with us about the need for the interactivity versus just the display. Where the devices are the oldest is in our primary elementary grades, so mostly in K and 1, and 1 in preschool. And there is a need for the interactivity piece there. For the time being, we have those classrooms hooked up with standalone projectors, but an added challenge for those classrooms and teachers, because most of the teaching and the communicating that the teachers are doing with students today are digital, to make sure we're meeting the needs of the kids in the classroom and the students who are in our cohort C group, or our kids who are home for other reasons.
Has the federal grant money that's allowed us to buy Chromebooks this year freed up any budgeted technology money that could be used this year to offset those costs to replace those boards?
Are you asking building level or Clarence's level?
Whoever might know.
So Chris, ask that question again. You're talking about specifically the federal money that came?
I'm wondering if we have the ability to fund any of the smart board replacements out of this year's budget, because we have technology money left over, because federal money allowed us to buy Chromebooks with a different funding source.
I have to see, Chris, if we have technology money left over. It begs a question, as we further in the year, will we have money left over that's not technology related? And then you want to talk about maybe some transfers or something, but I'd have to look to see how the schools have spent their technology lines. I'm not exactly familiar with what they've done to date.
Right. I'm trying to start within the confine of what we'd planned to spend on technology before we have a broader conversation about whether or not it makes sense to transfer to make those repairs.
I'm going to make an assumption, given to how much technology we've had to use to go remote, and given that we didn't have enough devices one-to-one to start off with, I suspect they probably use it, but I can't confirm that until I go back and check.
Okay.
And so if RES is experiencing last minute changes, are those going to be factored into the budget? Like if a smart board just died today, or if there's going to be other smart boards kicking the bucket in the near future, will we be able to?
You're always welcome to add money to the budget. We won't resist that.
So Colleen, to answer your question, Joe, I think that even though these smart boards they were already on the list to be replaced, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So in our building, there's close to 20 smart boards that date back to, I think it's 2008 or maybe sooner than that. So we're in a tricky situation now because they are starting to die. But I do think moving forward, as you said, with the support of our Director of Digital Learning, it will be important to have a plan for the future to recycle to the devices. We don't end up in this situation again, but stay up to date with the list as far as what would be most useful for our elementary students, and come up with some sort of a plan for every 4 or 5 years, or depending on the life of the technology that we're purchasing.
So Colleen, these new devices that Joe is reporting that just died, they were already on the list to be replaced. We were hoping to get to the end of the year with them still alive.
Okay.
It'll be helpful to have the input of a technology director in how we roll out these replacements and how we plan for this going forward, because it needs to feel more intentional, I think, than things are dropping dead in March and we need to replace them. So,
yep.
While we're on technology, are there any other questions with respect to those requests? If there are not, I want to revisit our working budget issues list that we've been working through over the course of the cycle. We've resolved the question of junior bridges. We have the question of health insurance still outstanding, and we have the staffing area still outstanding. We just talked about equipment requests with respect to technology. I don't know whether there's other equipment or infrastructure requests that we want to talk about. We haven't done a large-scale discussion about professional development. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions about the request for PD or extracurriculars or the impact of COVID or anything else. If there are no other questions on 4 through 8.
I have questions about the P. Wait a second. Did you say PE? PD.
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 Yeah, number 5.
Yeah, I have some questions about that.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
I have a question about the difference between the summer curriculum work and the outside consultant. At John Reed, there's 22,600, and it looks like I wrote 50 for the summer work, 15,925 for the consultant, RES 14,364 and 15,025. I would like to know what is the consultant providing? And this is the same consultant that's at Barlow. What have they provided thus far? And who's doing the curriculum work over the summer? And I just like that explained.
Can you, Heather, can you repeat where you are in the budget?
Yeah, but I wrote it down in language.
I
Okay, so to 24, 1116, 330 is the outside consultant, and then 116 on 1116, the same thing. That's at RES.
Okay.
Hey, people, what page is that?
Yeah, I think that's my section of the budget. So I'm happy to explain it. Yes, so that's being organized through my office, and the consulting work, I've asked for $10,000 per school for a consultant to support our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that funding will support both professional development for staff, and then also an initial review of existing curricula and recommendations for us to consider for future curriculum revisions. The summer curriculum work associated with the same topic with DEI revisions is quite small. At this point, I expect, based on timing, that we would just be beginning this work. So whether that occurs, I know we think of summer as being the first summer, but it could actually be in June of 2022. And that's really looking at one teacher representative per grade, K through 8, for one day to work on curriculum revisions.
That's at RES, that one teacher per grade for one day is $14,364.
It's not. It's a formatting issue with the budget document. So I can tell you more specifically what that is.
It's for the whole chunk, all of those lines.
Yeah, it's really for all of those lines. So for RES, that work in particular comes to, my estimate is $1,890. And for John Reed, it's, a little bit over $1,500 for the DEI work in the summer. There are a lot of other curriculum topics that we hope to tackle in summer curriculum revision work.
So, and then just to be clear on that 330 line, the outside experts and consultants, that's $10,000 for the DEI consultant. It's not 15.
It's $10,000 per school.
Right, but
so
the
330 also
is 15,025. I'm just looking at RES. So that's going to be other consultants in literacy, preschool, teacher evaluation.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we've been using literacy consultants, and to the extent that it's possible, I try and hire a consultant that will be working with both Easton and Reading at the same time. So essentially, each district gets twice as much. So if all of the, say, K through 2 teachers are engaged with the same consultant, each district pays for a day, and then the teachers have the benefit of 2 full days. So this is the type of work that I'd like to arrange with our consultant who supports our preschool curriculum work, as well as literacy consulting. And I think those are the highlights for that line. There's a small amount of money also put towards consulting for our evaluation tool. So certainly our new principal will need to be trained in the evaluation tool, and there's a cost associated with that.
And then can you tell us a little bit about what the DEI consultant has been doing at the high school? Are we happy with them? Or have we seen any results yet?
Yeah, I'd be happy to explain. We're really pleased with the work that we've engaged in with the Connecticut Center for School Change. Dr. Harrison and I actually just met with the consultants last week to discuss the progress thus far. At this point in the year, the consulting work in Region 9 has included 2 professional development sessions for teachers as well as for non-certified staff. They also meet on a very regular basis with a group they call the Advisory Council, which consists of students, parents, and staff members. And I would say the function of that group, while it's, it is an advisory leadership group, it allows for a deeper dive into the diversity, equity, and inclusion PD. So that group has more time together, and it's obviously a much smaller group, to raise questions, to consider new ideas, sometimes to review literature, and then discuss how that might inform their future work. So there's also a very purposeful plan for us not to have the work that's done in Region 9 be redundant with the work that's being done by the Tri-District Task Force. And so my goal is that any work we're able to do in Easton and Reading will complement the work that has already occurred at the high school and ultimately allow us to have all three districts reach similar goals with respect to building a deeper understanding of what it means to have safe and inclusive school environments where all students, all staff, all families feel supported.
So this curriculum work that the consultant brings would be put into effect for the next year. Meanwhile, there's other professional development that the teachers are doing now that we heard about before.
Yes. So at this point, we have been funding individuals, supporting teachers who are in leadership positions mostly, but sometimes individual teachers by request to attend conferences and workshops that are connected to our work in DEI. I most recently have been able to support some of our literacy specialists in both districts to engage in some work at the end of this summer or at the end of this year with multiple sessions, with the hope again that these are people in teacher leadership positions who will be able to bring back their new learning and turnkey it with our staff. So it's hard for me to estimate when the curriculum revision work that's more substantial might begin, because it depends in part on our conversations with the consultant group that we hire, and then the professional development that occurs with staff. So I'm very reluctant to have a large group of teachers engage in curriculum revision work before they've participated in professional development. And I also don't want to hire a consultant to actually do the work for us, because then if we don't really have a sense of ownership, I don't think it will carry in terms of implementation with the students.
I get that, or if you don't know why you're doing it. And I do know that the difference between what's happening at the high school and what happens on the task force is that we can't have, like we've discussed this, like small group discussions in private. You can't do that, obviously, if you're a committee of the board.
Can I ask a quick question in relationship to this topic? So I am not well informed on progress. Just, this is a, I'm talking about DEI, but I'm really wanting to understand our use of consultants in general. The DEI is just the example I'm going to use. Has the proper groundwork been laid to support the need for the consultant? I just want to make sure timing is everything, right? And I want to make sure that the timing is right for, and I don't want to slow down. I want to move fast, but I just want to make sure that we've done everything that we need to do ourselves in order to prepare for bringing the consultant in.
I think the timing is perfect, frankly. If I could have started this with the support of a consultant this year, I would have wanted to do that. The DEI task force of all three boards was formed, my memory is that it was formed in early summer. And yet without additional funding and time set aside, it's very difficult to engage in this work. So while we have the task force with all positive intentions, to actually dig into the professional learning side of things and be able to do a more thorough review of our curriculum takes 1, time, 2, funding, and 3, expertise. So that's what we're hoping to provide next year.
Thank you.
Other questions on the PD topic? All right. If there are not, what I'd like to do is broach the question of staffing and see if we can bottom out on the requested changes in headcount. And that starts with the question of classes, classroom teachers, and the perennial discussion on class size. And so the requests to bring everybody back to where we were is the addition of a first grade teacher and the addition of a fifth grade teacher. We had a lengthy discussion in our last meeting about the impact of the fifth grade teacher on the team model and the size of the cohort coming through this year and for the next several years through fifth grade, and the addition of a teacher in first grade, or really in the elementary school, wherever it slots, would result in 5 sections across the board, K-5, if my understanding is correct of the proposal. So I'm curious the thoughts of the board as to the staffing proposal and whether or not it's appropriate or what their views are. John?
Yeah, I was going to say, and A through J leaves us at that number that Clarence gave us at the top of the meeting at 24,092, 6.73 increase.
Correct. The D and G having been struck through are also reduced in Clarence's spreadsheet.
Right. So that all those are reflective.
Right. Anything you move here lowers the number. Anything you keep here keeps the number.
Got it. Thank you.
And just refresh my memory, there's no way to maintain the team structure in the 5th grade without adding that teacher.
That's correct.
I think it's adding the teacher or fundamentally changing the way we do ELA and math and shortening the instructional minutes, which I don't think is anybody's recommendation.
Or having larger class sizes, right?
That is always an option. They'd be pretty large. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you remind us of what the numbers are? Do we have that somewhere without having to dig through everything?
Natalie, can you remind me of how many will be coming in? Because I don't have that right in front of me. Let's see.
I think it's 93.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no matter what, we have to, we're going to have to add a person. And we would have to take them from the other grade levels because we can't, because just as a reminder, both math and ILA are a 1.5, students in terms of time, how much time students need with a teacher. It's not just a 40-minute period. It's that plus a callback every other day, and, which is actually less than what some schools already do. So we can't reduce that. And so that if we keep the current departmentalized structure, our math and ILA teachers cannot possibly fit that many students in that many periods into their day because there's that many more students per class. And the only way we can keep the current situation is to really up those class sizes.
Sorry, Phyllis, 93. I apologize. I think Rydell beat me to it, but 93 is
yeah, I can hear that. Thank you.
So with 93, if we, so regardless of the teaming structure that we're thinking about in 5th grade, essentially one easy way to think about it is students are all of the 5th graders will either be in 4 places at the same time or 5 places at the same time. Yeah. So if they're in 4 places at the same time, that puts your average class size at about 23, just over 23. So the issue there is, so 2 things. One, that doesn't leave a lot of space for any potential changes. So we know that we have 93 students in 4th grade right now that we could anticipate all 93 of those showing up as 5th graders next year. In previous districts where we would, where as a principal, I had to really work hard to advocate for, I know that these kids are coming. Central office would say it's not until we see the whites of their eyes show up in the building that we are willing to entertain any changes. So in this case, we have 93 sets of eyeballs that we know will be, we can anticipate will show up. Beyond that number, though, there is some question. So we know that the housing market continues to boom. We could make some speculations around what things may look like with the spring housing market and what that potential impact could be. So that might be 1 or 2 students, and right there you could see classes going to 24, 25. Then you take we do have students who families who decided to homeschool children for this year, or to move to a private school, or whatever the case. Those students could potentially come back, and then we are sort of in the same position that we were in at the start of this school year, where we're scrambling for a teacher. I will say that when it comes to last minute teacher hires, it is much easier to do that with an elementary teacher than with a middle school teacher that is subject specific, and which is, even though we could hire a K-6 person for this position, but we would want them to be very much focused on a specific subject. And then the last thing is really just about this, the anticipated needs that our students will have going into next year as it relates to COVID learning loss. What we recognize is that based on some of the challenges that kids have had over the last 12 months to what typical learning looks like, we will likely have more students who we would typically be working with in intervention, tier 2 intervention. Well, what happens when you have so many students that you're trying to address in tier 2, it no longer is a tier 2 issue, but you need to think of what changes in core instruction and really reconfiguring that. We had discussions about this with our administrative council last week, talking about really following an acceleration approach to addressing the potential learning loss. And all this means is that this becomes harder and harder to do when you have a larger class size. And so to the greatest extent possible, we really want to maintain reasonable class sizes, and to do that K-8, it really means that we have to prioritize that 5th grade teaching position and then the elementary position that we talked about at RES. That those are, I would say, from my perspective, and I'd be happy to hear from principals, although based on my conversations, I feel like they are right on board with me that these are probably the 2 biggest and most important requests in our budget going into next year. And we think about these requests as far as prioritization. So what has the direct impact on students? And these teachers will absolutely have a direct impact on students and the everyday function of how our teachers are able to meet their needs. Yes, we could potentially go to a larger class size, but we're not talking about the difference between 20 and 21. We'd be talking about the difference between 18 and 24, and that's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah. I'm privy to some information. Today I got a preview of the Malone and McBroom report. We have a timing issue in that they have a report they're going to issue on Thursday, but we're meeting tonight. So it doesn't help us here, but just to give you a preview, they're forecasting for Reading. I don't want to steal the thunder, but the pre-K through 8 is increase in enrollment. So I don't want to give the details, but just so you know that there's going to report that you all have in your hands by Thursday or Friday, which may add some light to this particular question. Unfortunately, I don't have it tonight, but I can give you a heads up that they are predicting, increased enrollment in the pre-K through 8 level in the near future.
Is there any insight with respect to this particular cohort of fifth graders?
I couldn't tell you. I got a draft of the presentation today. I viewed it, so I didn't look particularly at a certain grade. I was just looking at the overall numbers, but I can inquire tomorrow morning. But like I said, it doesn't help us right now in your decision making. But I saw the presentation, the draft of it, but I don't have a copy of it.
Any comments from board members about how they feel about either of these positions, sort of temperature of the room? John?
Yeah, as a parent in this cohort, some of the things that Dr. Harrison just outlined, I can't say that they're carved in stone, but I've heard from other parents who don't have their children in this year that they are planning returns for next year. So again, that's hearsay, but it's from people that I trust pretty well.
I think the lurker class is real and will have some impact, and we don't quite know where and to what extent, in addition to the real estate market. Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can't imagine rationally making an assumption that the number is going to go down. It's either going to stay the same or it's going to go up. I can't. So you would really, I think, have to stretch it to say, well, you know, maybe it looks like 18 today, but what if it goes down to 17? I'm talking about per class. I just can't see. All the dynamics are in the other direction.
When you talk about the total number of fifth grade students in the town of Reading who are either within school or not within school, to the extent we've seen the number, the aggregate has gone up in the past year, not down. It's just that our enrollment hasn't reflected that because of the transition of
right
in-migration plus sort of COVID pullouts.
Right.
Mike, were you trying to say something?
You were going around the room. Was Chris done? Sorry.
Please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so not obviously, I'm reluctant from just a pure budget increase standpoint to be for, anywhere near where we are currently. But Dr. Harrison does make a good case about this being an all hands on deck type situation next year with the COVID effect, all the time that these students spent not in school and trying to do their best online. So I just want to say, these two positions with everything that's going on do make sense. We're going to have to, for me to be for this budget, we're going to have to make some big moves on some other things that we have coming up here. Health insurance being one of them.
Yeah, if I could just add to what I said, is it not the case that chances are that this will actually build capacity in future years, 22 to 23? Yeah. So you're not looking necessarily, unless there's just an immense increase that we shouldn't anticipate.
Yeah, I think, Chris, when you look at the enrollment down to K, it sort of clusters around that 93 per cohort area, which should provide staffing stability for at least several straight years.
Yeah, that's so again, we always fall into the trap of thinking about just this one upcoming year, when in fact the case should be made, and what we've been telling ourselves, and then we don't do it, is we should be looking 2-3 years down the road, and how does it even out?
So Chris, you make a really good point. And one of the things that I would add to that we don't always think about, this became really apparent to me several years ago. I was in a district position where I was only in charge of professional development. And on average, districts spend about $22,000 a year on teacher professional development. So when we think about things like bringing in DEI consultants to work with our staff throughout next year, and then we want to be able to capitalize on that meaningful work that these consultants will do, we want to avoid then the following year having to say, oh, now we need 2 more teachers. because then are we going to do it all over again? Are they just always going to be missing out on it? So I think that this is a really good opportunity because, as Chris mentioned, we do really see that over the next several years, that rough cohort number in the 90s would sort of make sense, and we could anticipate needing 5 per grade level going forward. And that's a really good place for the stability standpoint and for the investments that we hope to make in our teachers and their own professional learning.
I would assume also that if the 5th grade teacher, if the need arose to be moved to the elementary school, that would be the right certification level, so that it could be someone who stayed in the 5th grade at the middle school, or if, we had a, bumper crop of 1st graders or 2nd graders, we could move them around, which is something to consider also. Because personally, like I've always said, like in the middle school, I don't think 22 kids in a classroom is a crazy amount, 23, but for that scheduling issue and having an 8th grade science teacher all of a sudden teaching 5th grade English, that to me is like a non-starter.
So to answer your certification question, Heather, yes, the person that would be hired to teach 5th grade would most likely have general elementary certification and would be able to teach at the lower grades as well.
I think we have to be careful about generalizing that middle school at 23 per class is okay in the context of 5th grade, which is largely considered an elementary grade level and sort of lives in this hybrid world where we move it into the middle school.
Right. I'm not saying it's ideal, but
right, more on the acceptable side.
Right.
And I think that but for COVID and the anticipated work we're going to have to do, bringing kids back and bringing kids up to speed again, socially, emotionally, and academically, we'd be having a very different conversation about how comfortable we are at 22 or 23. I'm not comfortable there in a post-COVID world with students transitioning to a new building, and all the factors that are playing in right now.
Also, we don't know if these students are going to be vaccinated, so we don't know what's going to be happening with that.
Mm-hmm.
So social distancing, you mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think the only vaccines have been approved for 16 and up. So that means 5th graders could still be
masked and social distancing.
Basically, every student we're talking about pre-K-8 is under 16. So
yeah. Bummer. Sorry to bring everybody down.
So am I hearing any dissent to moving forward with the 5th grade teacher being sort of semi-cemented into this and then moving on?
Can you put that issues list back up again?
Yeah, just a moment.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we blew right past. We blew right past 1st grade. It's so funny how we talk about JRMS differently than, I don't know if that was intentional, but we do talk about JRMS differently than RES.
Actually, that's a good point. Can we talk about a little bit more of the rationale for 1st grade?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest if we ask Natalie to kind of remind us what the section sizes are, and if we didn't add the teacher, what cohort would have the largest sections and what those would be.
Absolutely. So we are, as you know, requesting 5 classes at each grade level for the very reasons that Dr. Harrison shared. He and I have had several very lengthy conversations about the need now more than ever. And I know I shared at the last meeting too, my plea to you, I don't want us to be in the same situation where we were this past August, where we were needing to make really last minute decisions to meet the needs of our children. That's always going to be our priority. So that being said, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I'm going to kind of run through. based on what we are requesting at this point, first, second, and fourth will all be at 18 and 19 per class, given the 5 classes that we are requesting. Third grade is in fact our smaller cohort, but as Dr. Harrison shared regarding even our 4th graders going up to 5th, we do have a handful who are in private school or homeschooling right now, who we have to plan and anticipate that they are part of our family, and we're part of our family, and they could very well return. So without them returning, we're at 16. With them returning, we're at potentially 17. And I believe, as Chris Hacker mentioned too, I'm sure we're all watching it, the houses are going faster than they're coming up for sale. And as I've shared with you for the past several months, our numbers have been all over the place as we have people moving in. And again, some families opting to do the homeschooling for this year, given either health data or concerns that they have. Kindergarten, as we know, changes right up until the day before school starts. We have 70 right now on our list. And as we spoke today, and as I was talking to my secretarial staff, one of my secretaries turned around and said, just got the paperwork for one more. So that number, it's so hard to give that number, but the Prada projection, if I'm not mistaken, is 96 for next year. So I am thinking that number 70 will certainly creep up, and that will again be about 19 per class.
And I'm sharing your sort of breakout from January here.
Yep.
I wonder if there's also families that have moved in, but their kids have stayed in their previous district online, who might.
Well, technically, you're not supposed to do that. So
I know, but I know some that are. So
we all know them.
So really the issue is, if we were not to add the additional section, we would be running 3rd grade next year at 1920, basically.
And that's, Chris, as we had mentioned, I believe at the last meeting, you made a really good point that we do have that handful of children who are doing homeschooling and private schooling now. So automatically, that if those 4, 5, 6 children came back, we'd be at least at 21 per classroom. So just something to consider, because, again, we always say we wish we had that little magic ball that we could forecast the future, but we have to anticipate that those friends could be returning to us. And so,
because when I'm looking at this chart, I see 3 private school, 1 out of district for grade 2. So that implies at least 3 folks who have withdrawn for private school who are still living in Reading, which would bring us up to 2020, 21, 21 if everything else held steady.
Right. And if we had no other move-ins, correct.
Right.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. My numbers were drawn to the other grade level. I apologize for that.
So what are people's feelings about the necessity on the elementary section?
Probably no surprise for me. I'm convinced we need it. I'm convinced we need it. Dr. Harrison, I appreciate you going through the business case again, building the business case, especially for anybody, members of the community that didn't hear it the first time, but it's very clear to me, especially after what we've all experienced through the pandemic, that we need the positions.
Any other questions or comments on the elementary school? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Well, I'm supportive, but not a little bit softer than on the other one. I guess I'll just put it that way. And, to sort of echo Mike's point, we're going to have to look at some other areas and other issues before I can get comfortable with the overall budget. But for the purposes, I think what sort of puts me over is the whole pandemic issue, and having to you can't assume that away, you know? You can't assume that everything goes back to normal and, you know, so on that basis, I would be supportive, but I'm a little softer on this one.
I tend to.
And just, I'm sorry, Chris.
No, Heather?
I feel the same on that. The other factor that's in my mind is that, you know, if all those kids do come back, well, although, you know, if all those kids do come back, I don't think that's a crazy. I'll just say that I'm softer on that one also.
Yeah, I think, but for the pandemic, we'd be having it would be a much harder sell to talk about adding the section. I think the 5th grade is an easier sell for a variety of reasons than this one is. But the amount of work, known and unknown, that is going to have to go into the classroom next year, if, when, and how it returns to whatever normal is, says that if we're going to invest in education at a high level, then we have to do it in this sort of way. And if that means that we're deferring a music teacher again for another year, I think maybe that's what, you know, we ultimately have to do. But you know, 2 years ago, I would have said 1920 is probably fine. In the backside, with a pandemic, you know, I'm less comfortable in that space.
But let me ask you, if 1920 is okay for the 1st grade, it's not okay for the 3rd grade?
So right now, in going into 1st grade, we have 93. So it's going to be 18, 19 there.
Right.
Yep.
So if all the kids come back who are out, then we're going up to 18, 19 for the 3rd grade.
3rd grade. So we have talked in the past, Heather, about 3rd grade is a huge jump. Really living the primary world and going into that upper elementary world. The concepts are much more abstract and more developed and more detailed. Again, living in the shoes of a little person going from 2nd to 3rd grade, it's a massive jump as it is. The other thing that we did not really talk a whole lot about, but let's hope that we can group our desks back together again someday. But our children from kindergarten on up are still in rows, 3 to 6 feet apart, facing the front. And with 20, 21 in the room, 3 feet's a hard thing to do. So again, I wish we knew, you know, August, September, are those restrictions and those guidelines going to be lifted? Are we going to have a different protocol that we are following? And unfortunately, we don't know that piece of it. Again, I'm nervous to make an 11th hour decision on August 28th before the kids come back, because either we don't have enough space in the room or we're not able to meet the needs of the kids. I absolutely hear what you're saying, Heather, in terms of some of these other grade levels being at 18 and 19. My concern with the grade 3 is that this is 19 and 20 with 0 move-ins and with the potential of the friends coming back too.
Right.
So many factors. So many factors.
I'm just weighing this against the music teacher. Also, you know, being able to provide some joy to everyone at the middle school, every kid. That if 19, 20 are okay, kindergarten, 1st grade, it's a little harder case to make to me that the music teacher goes away for another year. And
because this is a different conversation than we've had in the past, where we took a cohort of 68 kids, I think it was, and brought them down from 4 sections to 3 sections. This is maintaining that cohort. This is increasing the number of sections of the cohort without really a material change in their enrollment that we know of.
Right, and I find it a little tricky to say, like, if we're okay at 19, 20 in kindergarten, 1st grade, but then in the 3rd grade, and I understand what you're saying about it being like a jump that year, but I don't know that I don't know that it would be more beneficial for more of the people to have the music teacher. If that's where we're going, I don't know where we're going. I'm just putting that out there.
So we had the same conversation last year. And in fact, Jamie Barrickman spoke at some point asking us the same question. Why wouldn't you target a smaller class size in kindergarten if possible? And what I remember Natalie explaining to us is it's not that it's okay, it is what it is. And if you add another section, then the class size dips what is perceived to be too low. So it's not like the implication that it's okay because it is just more of a factor of adding the additional adding an additional section would drop the number too low. If I'm bungling that explanation, Natalie, please correct me. But I remember having almost the same exact conversation last year.
But if you added a kindergarten section to the projected enrollment next year, you'd be at 16s and 17s, not 14s and 15s. Which, to Heather's point, begs the question, if we're going to be talking about 16s and 17s, why wouldn't it be kindergarten instead of third grade?
Or I mean, and I get what you're saying, Colleen, and I think, as I recall, that Jamie was saying, like, why are you not asking for, like, if we know that class size is better at 17, 18, why are we not asking for that? But we're looking at a huge number. We're being realists, and it's a harder sell if all the other classes pretty much are in the 18, 19, 20 range, and then that grade is 15, 16. And we don't get a music teacher.
I want the music teacher too.
Right, because I mean, another way to, and this gets a little bit wonky, is to say that you're going to allocate an FTE and it's going to have an enrollment trigger, and that it only applies to, you know, K4 if the enrollment is over a certain number, or if it forces a class size to a certain number. Otherwise, it becomes a music teacher. It kind of becomes unfair to the administration that way, but it's another way to kind of look at it.
Yeah.
Natalie, I have a question. Yeah. You show 79 students in grade 3 next year, and then actually this is what Chris is sharing on his screen, and then you have, you know, a certain number that are, well, actually you have no grade 2 that are homeschooled, but you have 3 private school in grade 2 currently. So these numbers, the 79 does not include those 3. Is that correct?
The 79 is the Prouder projection. So let's make sure to look at the top left graph. That's what we currently have. Well, as of when I did this in January, our numbers are bubbling a little bit, but those are on the board report. So if you look at grade 2 at 78 as of January 13th, yep. Just pulling my screen down. Yep, we're still at 78 in that grade level.
And that 78 does not include the 3 that are out at private school.
No, it does not. The 78 on the top left is who we have in the building right now as we speak.
So there are arguably 81 second graders floating around.
Right.
Reading, basically.
Without potential move-ins or move-outs. So yeah.
Thank you.
It's tricky because you can apply that same logic to each grade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true.
Why don't we put a, it sounds like the consensus was that the 5th grade seems like a general necessity, and the elementary school teacher still is a question depending on how other things kind of fall the rest of the evening. So why don't I pull the issue list back up, and we can talk about the music and the PE, the sort of 2 specials requests that are in there. If I recall correctly, starting with the PE at RES, that was basically to accommodate increasing enrollment and make sure that there are enough sections of PE taught to all of our K-4 students. Is there any concern about that addition or willingness to talk about taking it out?
If you take it out, then not everybody gets PE. I don't understand what.
We had talked at the last month's meeting about there being an inequity among our fine and practical arts teachers. So currently, in order to make it work, we have 1.6. We have a full-time, and then we have a 0.6 phys ed teacher. The 1.0, the full-time, is teaching 6 more classes per week than her fine and practical arts counterparts. So we were looking, and no, everybody in the building, Heather, is having, all the K4 are having 2 phys ed classes per week. So no one's missing out on it. It's just putting a strain on the individual that we have in that full-time position. So to balance it out and ensure that kids will still receive the 2 physical education opportunities a week, we were increasing our 0.6 up to 1.0, so that there could be a balance and equity among the fine and practical arts teachers, so that we don't have one teacher teaching 30 classes a week and one teaching 24 a week. That makes sense.
But the number of minutes of instruction will not change.
Right. Unless we redo our schedule. Right. At this point, based on what we know, based on what we're doing currently, correct. There will not be a change.
But you can't have the kid, I mean, this may be a completely stupid question, but you can't have the other fine and practical arts teachers teach more, like take some of that, like are they missing out on art or?
No, art, all the children K4 have it once a week. Library media once a week. Music once a week. Phys ed is the twice a week class because of the guidelines for physical movement and activity for children. So I wouldn't be able to have an art teacher teach a gym class, because that comes in with certification too.
Marching band? Would marching bands count?
But it's like saying that you're going to teach everybody art twice a week with less than 2 art teachers.
Right.
Because it takes 1 full art teacher to hit everybody in the building once at the moment.
That's right. That's right, Chris. That's a good way to think of it. So if the kids are having 2 phys ed opportunities, we need to put 2.0, because the 1.0 art is taking care of the whole school to have 1 art opportunity, similar for music, similar for library.
And that's tied to the number of classroom sections we have, I assume.
Correct.
So if we increase the number of classroom sections, we're increasing the strain on the situation, and vice versa.
Yeah, so right now we have, right now we would have potentially 1 less classroom than we would next year. So it really would not be incredibly impactful. It would be 1 class per week per music and art and library, and then the 2 classes for phys ed.
If we go to 25 sections K4, then you're asking for 50 gym classes each week, which would be 10 per day.
Or broken down, it would be 25 per educator. And right now the teachers are doing 24. The library, media, and art. Library, media, art, and music are doing 24 per week. So they'd be doing 25 per week, as would the phys ed teachers.
Chris?
Yeah. Chris, I'm perfectly willing to follow your lead on how you're guiding us through the issues list. I'm kind of anxious to get to number 2.
Yeah.
Because to me, and not everybody may share this, but to me, my impression is that making a decision on that between the 1 and the 2 stop loss and all that is going to have the biggest impact on what we have left.
I agree, Chris.
A lot of these other issues on the issues list, there's going to be some ambivalence about them depending on what happens with
how
the health.
aggressive we need to be otherwise, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm only speaking for myself, and
Yeah.
if you've got another approach, that's fine.
No, I'm happy to do that. I was trying to take the temperature of the room on these different staffing positions to see where there was that ambivalence and where there was sort of the take it
Yeah.
from my cold dead hand sort of feeling on anything.
Well,
I feel that way about the music teacher. I'm excited for that music teacher because what has happened to the music program at John Reed is shameful for a community like ours.
Don't we really need 1.0 music?
That's what I'm saying. We need 1.0, not the 0.5.
Then why don't we pivot over to the health insurance conversation, see where we're comfortable bottoming out, have Clarence give us a sense of where that puts the increment, and then feel out how comfortable we are from there and how much work we want to get done from there. I am going to pull up the Brown and Brown report if I can find it. Was open. There we go. So if we recall, this is the summary sheet that we were provided back in January. And what we have budgeted now is the 2 stop loss number of $3.34 million total budget. And that is in line with the Brown and Brown conservative request. And when we last spoke in February, we had talked about our general willingness to go down to, at possibly a minimum, the Anthem requested number of 2818, which would be a reduction of approximately $525,000.
Mr. Chair, may I point out something? If you look at that chart you're showing on the Reading section, if you look down towards the bottom, the 815, 821.
Yep.
That sort of change in the budget. If I just plug in a reduction of $800,000, so basically wipe out the quote unquote change, you come down to like a 3.18% variance increase. So to Chris's earlier point, this is the item that really will move the needle. And you just got to make a decision, if you make it 500,000 versus 800,000, to your point, it drops down to, let's see here, 4.51. So it's literally your decisions here is what's going to really get you where you need to be, to reaffirm Chris's point.
I'm sorry, the 815,000 is the delta between.
That delta is what they're showing between what they had proposed for our budget for this year and what the 2 stop loss is. So if I just take the 815, just round it to 800 and take it out our existing budget, you get down to like 3.18% increase. If I reduce the 500,000 to the 1 stop loss, it's like 4.5%. So it's a question of risk tolerance, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that Reading right now is the worst performing of the 3 districts regarding health claims. So you've got a real serious dilemma in that the reserves are probably appropriate because of your recent claims history, but the question is, can you move it off your books and put it, whether in a non-lapsing account or some reserve at the town? But if it's on your books, your budget increase is going to be significant.
We can't fully have this conversation either without thinking about what we're going to end up doing in June. Board members, you know what I'm talking about. We're probably going to top up the reserve. If we did what we did last year, we're going to top it up to 500,000 at the end of June. So that's a big part of this discussion. That's our reserve for over, and above what we, are going to budget for the year. That's our, So when we have the budgeted amount plus the reserve plus Brown and Brown punching it up another 525,000, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. I think we're way over budgeted there.
It's super conservative at that point. It's
And I also add in, and of course you can't really go into this, but if we're looking at potential retirements and replacement with newer teachers. That implies to me, now you can't tell one, I understand all of that, but I mean, your universe is changing year to year. We already know that. So you can't necessarily, or maybe you should, but I'm having a hard time assuming a static pattern, year to year, given that we know that there is going to be some significant change.
Historically, what's the lowest we've ever left this number at this point?
Which number? What do you mean?
Like how much have we budgeted to put into this? Like notwithstanding what we add after everything shakes out at the end.
You mean with respect to as against the Anthem or Brown and Brown recommendation?
Yeah.
I couldn't say.
I mean, isn't there a dollar number? Like,
I mean,
Well,
what
Heather,
I'm curious
if you-
about is if we took the prior 3 years claims history, which I think was about $222 a month, something to that effect, and you applied that on an annualized basis, and you said that we expect the whole program to cost $2.7 million, and you add a 10%, expected growth to that, and you say that it's a $2.9 million program, and then you take off of that the
Reserve.
employee contribution, and you walk that back, you're probably at a $2.67 million program, which is slightly less than, but in line with the Anthem allocation projection of 2.8, which is somewhere north of flat and, kind of gets us into a ballpark range. There's at least methodology to it.
Chris, can you, if you scroll up in that document to the bar chart, the line chart for Reading?
Yep.
They have the historical information and claims, so you can sort of see the answer to the question about what the history has been. Not that one. Keep going.
Oh, this is.
Well, that one may address it too, but there's.
Oh, this
yes,
one. There we go.
that one. So that the green line is your trend, but remember you went to you changed programs with the high deductible, so it's going to create some variations. That gives you the history of where your claims have been.
So the total plan cost trend has been under 4% for the past 8 years.
Yeah, and then if you go to the original one you showed Chris, the next one down.
Yep.
Now you're getting to the dollar amounts of where we're talking about. This is going back to 15, 16 up through to what they're projecting now. So the blue line is adjusted actual.
This is showing an Anthem projection of 3.14. I saw an Anthem projection of 2.8 on the following slide. Or is that inclusive of that must be inclusive of the employee funding?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can sort of see a sort of a flat line around a 2.5, 2.6. The issue then is you talk about the reserves you already have on hand, and then sort of offset that against your recent claims history, and you got to make that sort of risk analysis.
So if you built in, here it's talking about an upward trend in the 7s, and if you set a 7.5 or 8% upward trend in projected history based on the average, I think you have to talk about whether or not you think the current year trend is sustainable or not, or whether you're going to discount that, and how much you factor the existing reserve balance. To Mike's point, if you sit and assume that you're going to walk into the new fiscal year at 500, where you're factoring that in the analysis and saying that's my overage that I'm going to have as a backstop in case I'm too aggressive in budgeting at a 7% increase over the 3-year average or something to that effect.
I would agree with that approach. That makes logical sense to me.
And just to pull up the health insurance report for this month while we're having the conversation, current year average is 241, prior year average is 230, 3-year average is 222.
Yeah,
Which
but
is
Chris, the
suggesting about a
numbers are going to
5%
be
increase.
skewed. If you look at the note, your numbers, the most recent numbers are going to be skewed. Look at the note there.
Because that number is too low for January.
Yes, it is, because they've already called us. There's 2 reasons why it's low. They've already said it's going to see a massive surge for February, like 800 some odd thousand in aggregate. So I don't know how it's going to allocate between the 3 districts, but
That's
note,
3 ways, not.
yes, it's 3 ways. I just don't know how much is going to come to Reading and how much is going to come to Easton or Region 9.
I think you almost killed John, but.
Yeah.
That's why we put the note there, so don't get excited that the number's low.
Well, when you started with, there's about to be 800,000.
Well, until I get the report, like I said, I can't allocate it, but they just called me and told me that there's going to be a big number coming across the wire to us in the next week or so, and they just want to give me a heads up not to freak out about it. I already knew the rationale, so I told them.
But if you throw out the January history, the current year to date is averaging about $250,000 a month then.
Yep.
Which is up in the ballpark of 15% off of the average. But this is anomalous compared to Easton and Region 9 at the moment.
Correct.
Well, what I was saying, except I muted myself, was that 250 times 12 is 300. 300 is closer to the 2.8. You know what I'm saying? It's closer to the 2.8 Anthem than the 3.5 B&B.
Right.
If you're and if we top up the reserve to 500, we have a $500,000 margin of error.
Yeah.
Right, which is 2 months worth of error. It's
a lot.
Yeah.
And we're using the B&B in our calculation currently.
The B&B with the 2 stop losses is what's in the budget right now. It's the most conservative way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah, the approach was we knew we could always trim it back, but we just took the sort of worst case scenario, and then from there you guys can make decisions.
So going back to the summary slide here. If you were to take the prior year's budget up 10%, for example, as a projected increase, instead of being up 800,000, we'd be up 200 and what was prior year on this?
Prior year would be up just around the yellow line.
Where am I looking?
Right there.
This is Region 9 requested budget for next year.
I think that,
Or is that this year and it's just mislabeled?
yeah.
You got to go to the second column in from the, third column in from the left. They label everything Region 9, but that, see at the top where it says Reading, go down from there.
Yeah, I think they're confused. The typical confusion of ER9 with Region 9.
And the year.
Right.
That's a confusing row name. So when I look at the budget binder from last year, which I happen to have right here, for 2021, the approved is like roughly 2.6. I'm doing mental math, which is not reliable, but I could add it right here.
Right. So if you add between 8 and 10%, you're at that 2.8 Anthem number.
Yep.
Which is probably not far off from what they plugged in themselves. And so if we were to do that, Clarence, that's the number that brings us into the 451 increment range.
So if you say you want to go from 2.6 to 2.8, that's say $200,000 delta. So let me Let me pull it up and tell you right now. So in that case, we'd be reducing it by 600,000. If my back of the envelope makes sense.
Mhm.
It brings you to 4.07. Just rounding it a flat 600,000.
Now, when we talk about going with Anthem's number, does that mean we don't use Brown and Brown anymore, or they still help us? We just use Anthem's estimate.
You always have a choice of what number you're going to use. You can use an Anthem number, you can use a Brown and Brown numbers, you can just use your own number. It's just giving you some guidance of the world of sort of like, you know, you want a third party beyond the actual provider of the health insurance. You don't just accept their number because
Right.
They'll still talk to you, Colleen.
So I'm actually, we still need them, even if we were to pick. I'm actually thinking of it in a different way. Take out their fee. If we choose Anthem, we still need Brown and Brown to help us somehow.
yes, yes. So this analysis on the monthly health insurance reports, they do the data that we need to rely to give you the information.
Got it. Okay.
And when you're looking at Brown and Brown's numbers, they are projecting this so that they are protecting themselves from being wrong on the high side. They don't want their clients to say, why did I get whacked here? You didn't tell me about this. They're much happier to say, look, you were under this.
And also, if you look at their one stop loss number, it's much closer than the Anthem number. So you got to remember we made a choice between the 2 stop loss and the 1 stop loss.
Right. Their one is at 3.15 million instead of 3.3 million.
So what if we do 1 stop loss? What's that look like?
3.15 on the Brown and Brown number. Anthem's not factoring it. In a call-out kind of way.
Anthem also factors us as a unified group. What Brown and Brown is doing is they understand that we're 3 separate districts, or actually 4, including central office. So they're allocating, Anthem approaches this unit as a unified group. So they're allocating the risk across all parties. And we know that's not the reality, given that we have 4 separate entities that we're insuring. So that's one of the factors that Brown and Brown brings to the table, because Anthem is viewing it as one unified body.
Anthem just sees it as 142 out of 391 and applies that ratio to the ER9 claims history, basically.
Correct. And it has nothing to do with the actual claims history. It's just they're looking at the aggregate, and then they're
right. They're saying overall this is an $8 million program. You have 142 391sts of it, so that's $2.818 million.
Correct.
Can we go back at some point to the original layout where, you know, you took the first number and then you made adjustments, mostly reductions?
Sure. If
Clarence's spreadsheet,
and see what happens when you take off that 815,000.
Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yeah, that one.
All right. So I just took off the 600,000 we talked about. So let me do it here. So if we take out the 600,000,
well, okay, all right, we'll see what this does.
If you change it to a full 800, well, that's 8 million. We don't want that.
Yeah, we do.
Down to 3.18. So like I say, it literally is what's going to move the needle. So 400 gets you close to a flat 3%. If you do the 600, it's a 4.07. And for those, I can't give you a specific function, but that would be objects 270 and 271 throughout the book in a variety of places.
And apologies, the difference between 815 and 600?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The differential that we were talking about going 600, which I understood, going on the Anthem or the not going with the Brown and Brown number. But then where's that 850, that 215 between?
The 800 is basically if you just didn't do, you basically essentially kept it flat. You didn't do the $815,000 increase that Brown and Brown was saying. So I just rounded the 800, just give you an order of magnitude and make it exactly 815.
Okay. And you're saying 600 just be a little bit more conservative.
Yeah, just because if you break to Chris's point, if you went up to the 2.8, that's a $200,000 difference. So I reduced the 800 by 200,000, get to 600.
Okay.
And that's Anthem's recommendation. So if I'm following the explanation, the 815 is almost of interest, but not really a practical, based on what we've been advised. It's not really a practical number, but the 600 is because it's Anthem's number.
I would actually say it's the opposite, because the Brown and Brown number is based on actual claims history for Reading, where the Anthem number is just a mathematical formula based on the aggregate number of the entire districts. And it's a worst case scenario on a two-stop loss. You don't have to do the two-stop loss. You can do the one-stop loss, but as Chris pointed out earlier, the Anthem number is really just a formula that has nothing to do with the reality of each individual's district's claims history. Where
But
the Brown number does have some reflection on the actual claims history.
But no one's recommending that we stay flat, and flat is the $800,000 reduction, right?
Correct. Yes.
So Brown and Brown one-stop loss is a reduction, but not 600,000. It's I can't remember what the number was, but on Chris's previous sheet. So
it might be close to $300,000, because I think it was a $300,000 difference between their one-stop loss and Anthem.
So we can still follow advice of experts and potentially select a $600,000 savings if you're comfortable with Anthem's average number.
Yeah. So for instance, if you want the one-stop loss approximately, like when you get down to like almost 5.5%.
And how are we tracking unspent for 2021?
If you in your board packet for tonight, we gave you a direct, slightly updated output from our new financial system. The reporting does not work, still not works. So we couldn't give you an object summary, so we gave you almost a direct output that I had to make some minor adjustments. I don't have it in front of me, but
I can share it if you want, Clarence.
Go ahead. Let me stop sharing, and you can share it. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Chris. I might have to be like flipping through all my tabs.
And I'm trying not to print everything.
Print it all.
I know.
All right, so what you're looking at, everything on this page except for the column that says anticipated expenses is a direct output from the eFinance Plus. So what I did with the anticipated expenses, so I think there's a typo there. We basically backed out the salaries that haven't been encumbered yet. So that's where you'll see most of those are salary or Social Security and Medicare lines. Everything else we've left. So it's a direct data feed. We try to do it by grouping of account numbers, so it's somewhat similar to the budget object summary. But Chris, if you scroll down to the bottom, so what it's basically saying, looks like you're missing.
There's no sum.
That's what I noticed before.
You guys are missing some pages. They didn't give you. There's supposed to be 4 pages there. So let me share it since I have it. There should be 4 pages there. Hold on one second. Reading year to date. Here we go. My computer is going slow. All right, Reading year to date. Here we go. And now let me share. All right, can you all see that? Or you still see my original thing or the new one?
That's Reading YTD now.
Okay, that may look a little small, but so let me blow it up some so you can see a little better. So we broke it up. So right now, if we back out the salaries and Social Security, we're showing an available balance of $659. But obviously, some of that's going to get spent. But as of February 22nd, that's what our view, what sort of left available that is unspoken for as of February 22nd. And I will send this out to you. I can send it to an Excel format or PDF, but it's sort of, so right now, as of the 22nd of February, we had that has obviously changed. So we've had some things come in, records come in since the 22nd, but you're talking about $660,000 that's unaccounted for or unspent as of February.
Okay, I
That's
wasn't.
about 2 3/4, 3%, basically.
Yeah, so like if you, let's see.
Could probably replace some smart boards with that.
Yeah, you're basically at 2.9% left in the budget. Now, back to our previous conversations about non-lapsing can go up to 2%. So if we're able to conserve some of this money, we can get the non-lapsing set up. You know, the vast majority of this, or 2/3 of it, could go towards that purposes.
I'd feel seeing that makes me a lot more comfortable with making some of it. Gives me greater risk tolerance, we'll call it.
Yeah.
I mean, the 600 was a little bit more conservative path, but seeing these numbers makes me a little bit more comfortable with the 800 number.
What about 9?
So in reality, we can probably manage to sort of turn off the spigot and not buy things and, you know, preserve most of that, but some of it will be spent, but we can, you know, through active management, try to preserve as much of that capital as possible. But the issue is, if you do that, you have to have some reasonable assurance that you're going to be able to use it for the purpose of your health reserves. And I'm not familiar with your process here, so that may be up to your discretion, or I don't know if the Board of Finance has to speak on that or not.
Yeah, customarily, we have met in the end of June when we have a clearer picture of where the budget's going to land to make sort of a final allocation to apply to the health insurance reserve and or to seed money back to the general fund, basically, and make the decision as to what our comfort level is in both of those directions. And the past several years, it's been to put the health insurance reserve at or about $500,000 and then return whatever is in excess to the town at that point. Obviously, the conversation about a non-lapsing account adds an additional layer of discussion to the whole situation.
And to, I think, John's point, if given that you've got some smart boards or Promethean boards that have died now, if you want to purchase them now, given they're dead now, that could also relieve some pressure. It's a question of how you guys want to sort of utilize these funds.
Also, so I know this is not a health insurance related question, but if there's federal funding, is there any update as to any relief? And it shouldn't even say federal, it could be from the state, just from anybody. Any relief, funding relief that, do we have any more clarity on what might be happening?
I won't call it funding relief. There are some grants that we need to apply, so we may be able to expand that depending on how the grants are applied, but I don't want to speak on it because I don't have the details yet. So we have some grant funding that I know that we have some that needs to be spent before June 30th. So that will definitely get spent, and we got to figure out how much that is, and some will be able to carry over. If you guys have listened to some of our other board meetings, we've had a discussion about the state is really prefers we take a different approach in how we spend our grant money. Typically, they like to see us spend 85% in the first year, and then you carry the last 15%. For some reason, we've been doing basically the inverse of that. So we got to get a process change around here, but that's going to, hopefully get that worked out in the next few months going forward.
And I think, Colleen, to the extent you're referring to sort of COVID relief dollars, the phrase that everybody hears is that it's supplement, not supplant. And so we have to be very careful not to sort of horse trade federal dollars for budget dollars and to try to allocate that money towards regular expenses.
Correct.
Okay.
Getting those smart boards that are broken now, and then bringing this number in our budget as low as everybody's comfortable with, and getting the teachers and the music teacher. That's what I would be comfortable with.
Can you articulate that a little bit better, Heather?
Nope.
Or can you articulate it again, Heather?
She's pushing me to go down another 200,000. She adds another teacher at the.
I would be comfortable taking our teachers from the projected insurance line and then bringing it as low as possible. And also buying those smart boards now because kids now could use them, right?
So that I understand, Heather, you're
take the smart boards out of next year's projected budget.
Right.
And then bring that health insurance line as low as everybody's comfortable with, at least enough to get us those teachers, including the full music teacher at John Reed.
So is the first stage of that would be, what is the budgeted cost of the smart boards? Remove that on the expectation that it gets taken out of
this year,
current year's budget.
Yeah.
Second, what is the health insurance number everyone's comfortable with? Stop there, figure out what the increment is, and then figure out what that does to the teachers.
Yeah. That's one way of putting it.
You couldn't have said it better yourself, Heather.
I'm still impressed with the magic of the spreadsheet. I like long multiplication tables and long division.
Heather, it's called formulas.
We're used to dry erase boards and like writing numbers up on the wall in the community room.
I'm used to like a long speech about.
Chris, would you like me to figure out or take and search in the budget to figure out where those smart boards are and how much money that is?
I think that would be, why don't, if you
I
can
tell
do.
you, it's
Okay.
22, 25. Now that we're back to English, I could jump back in. I'll let you all talk about the insurance. 22, 25, 732. It's in RES budget.
Is there any in John Reed?
I will double check unless Phyllis, you know off the top of your head. But we were talking about the ones at RES. So they have 10 interactive whiteboard replacements for a total cost of $30,000.
And I think we've been following 5 replacements every year. I think that's the plan, if I recall from Damien.
I also want to be careful not to get back to what Joe said earlier, getting in the position of, we bought a whole bunch of them and put ourselves in a really weird replacement cycle where they're all going to die out on the same cycle if we can avoid it.
We also don't know if there's not going to be some additional technology that everyone's like, why are you still using it? These are like the flip phones in 2 years.
Well, that was some of the conversation, Heather, that I had with Natalie and Joe, especially given that that we are moving to one-to-one, and if kids have devices in front of them, is there a need for that device at the front of the room? But as Joe was mentioning, that these are more for the primary grades where that interactive capability is really important.
Is there a program where you lease these things so that if they break, they're replaced, and then when the technology is upgraded, you get the upgraded technology?
Heather, one thing, the new platforms is not the upgrade is not the technology, the upgrade is the software. So as the new software comes on, you can use it and it expands the viability of the hardware. So it used to be very hardware driven in the past with the original smart boards. This is now more, software driven. So the hardware just allows you to embed the new software that comes out.
So I see the line, well, okay, so in the February 18th budget that we were sent, I do see the line where it has interactive whiteboard at JRMS, interactive classroom technology and interactive whiteboard, 6 boards at $3,000. So it was there. I don't know where it is right now, but that's under, let me not be mysterious here, 2225, so technology plan, and then it's 732. Okay, so, but I want to be a cynic for a moment. I love this kind of creative thinking. But I also think we need to be very transparent and careful with, any sort of change in plans. And so what we're discussing here, this is acceptable sort of financial responsibility and financial health to do what we're discussing here, which is, so, okay, I'll leave my question there. Question mark.
I will respond to that, and I think Chris will probably follow up. There seems to be a perception in the local community that you can't do what's just been described, but in the reality, the way school budgets work, when you all approve a budget and the town signs off of it, it's approved as a single line item. It's X dollar amount, and it's considered called an itemized estimate of expenditures. And what you have the statutes say that because they realize things change. And as long as you stay within your overall budget and don't exceed your overall budget, you are free to move things around within your itemized estimate of expenditure. That language is very specific. That's why in the statute, it's not called a school budget. So I hear your question, but it's not only is it okay, it's the common practice.
Can I also remind everyone that last year when we built this budget, we had no idea what was in front of us. It was at this time last year. We had no idea if our schools were going to be open or closed, if we were going to need to be spending all kinds of money on PPE. We were shooting in the dark. There was a big cry in the community to cut 10% off the top of our budget. I think we can say it's a good thing we didn't do that. But I also think that if there are things that we didn't need to pay for this year, that we thought we might have to pay for this year, and we know we've got some busted smart boards at the elementary school, why not fix them if we didn't have to buy all those shields for the classroom or whatever? I mean, isn't that how you budget in your home? Isn't that responsible?
Heather, that sort of change in fact pattern is why they have the terminology, because things change that you can't predict. Because if you set your budget in February and a pandemic comes in March, are you going to stick by that you're going to have to spend the money exactly for what, that particular line item you put it in? That's why the language is like that.
Right. And last year people were saying nobody's going to be able to pay their taxes. And here we are, we're plowing through, and if we didn't have some expenses that we were anticipating, I think that it would be the prudent thing to fix something that's broken in our elementary school.
I think there's a fundamental difference between fixing something that is broken and no longer functioning. Like if a pipe broke, we wouldn't talk about whether or not to transfer money to fix the pipe until next budget year. We would transfer the money and fix the pipe. If the smart boards are broken and our instructional tools, we should be talking about fixing the broken technology in the current year and making the appropriate transfers to do that. I think it would be different if we said, let's take $600,000 and buy 4 years worth of Chromebooks and store them because we have the money sitting there and we might as well spend it. And I think that the cultural expectation, I think it's a sound one in the community, has been don't just run out and spend every dime because you can. Use reasonable restraint and act with reasonable prudence. And that has led us to be returning money to the town on a somewhat regular basis, among other things, but has also built a certain level of expectation and trust that we're not going to buy all the paper we need in the month of June for 3 years just because we can. So when it comes to the smart boards, to the extent that they are broken, and to the extent we have 80 school days left this year, I would, if we can find a way to have our kindergarten, first and second graders using functional technology, we should be having that conversation more so than how can we budget to pay for that in August of next year.
Yeah, and Chris, to that point, I mean, I do think it's important while there's, I appreciate you speaking to the cultural expectation from the community, because I think that's also important. And so it's almost like these are two separate conversations. So outside of this being a budget workshop, we really could be having the conversation of, we have broken smart boards in classrooms that need to be fixed now. I think that where this becomes relevant in this discussion is that we're saying we need to fix them now. And that means that that money would not need to be in next year's budget because it broke sooner than we anticipated. I think just that distinction is just important from a community understanding point. That this isn't the equivalent of additional reams of paper because we have a little bit of money left.
I would be comfortable fixing what is broken and then not going beyond that when it comes to technology purchases until we have a technology director on hand.
And that would be the safest way to do it, is that if we knew that there were 4 broken or 7, whatever the number is, broken smart boards that are otherwise, failure to replace them means taking away, instructional tools that otherwise would be there and were expected to be there, then whatever that number is times 3,000, that's your number.
Joe, how many are broken right now? If you're listening.
Well, he has a 2 little human. Oh, maybe he's there.
No,
There he
I'm
is. Okay.
just looking at the list that I have in front of me and just counting up the exact number so I can give you an accurate number.
And I guess we would need the same from John Reed if there are any there that are broken as well.
3. So currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Phyllis, do you know about
I
how many
do.
are broken at JRMS?
There are a handful, I believe, because Darlene and Damien just did a walkthrough of the building, but unfortunately, I don't have that number with me, but it's probably about a handful. Yeah, a 5 maybe.
So
Chris.
the other way to think about, sorry, just what
Go ahead.
Dr. Hanson was saying is that this could very well be a part of the meeting where we are being asked to allocate funds to fix the broken smart boards, and then regardless of whether it was in the budget for next year.
Well, Heather, as part of the budget discussion, we're saying they're broken right now. We should not be talking about these for next year. We should fix them.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Are we legit?
So
Yeah.
maybe we could close out a few items here because I think we're converging on a few things. Maybe if we could have Clarence plug the number for health insurance that's 800 less than the Brown and Brown number. Plug, take 10 smart boards out. Let's do those now.
30,000.
What else were we just talking about? I think those are the 2 big things.
Isn't it 600? I hate to go back to this. I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. But isn't it 600 out for health insurance?
Well, Colleen, I view it as we're in a situation where there's a lot of upward pressure on us, and we've got 3 numbers. It's flat to last year, knowing that we have a surplus coming that we can top up our reserve, right? So I think we're safe in knowing that even if we spend our entire reserve now, we can top it back up to 500 in June. So that would be a case for leaving the number flat year over year versus going with Anthem or Brown and Brown.
I'm with Mike on that.
And so that would be taking 830,000 out of the running number, which would, I feel like, bring us down to about 3 flat, Clarence?
830 plus 10 smart boards. Were they 3?
I'll tell you.
No, it's the 800 plus the 30, Mike.
Right.
So yeah, so 800 plus the 30.
But 800 was an exact number.
It wasn't. 800 was just a back of the envelope number, so I have to go to the exact number. But so if you do the 800 plus the 30, it comes out to 3.05.
What about putting in the? I mean, we're only staying on this, or are we adding stuff in?
Chris, would you put your issues list back in?
I can pull that up. Yep.
I want to make that music teacher a full 1.0 because, as it was explained at the last meeting, that sometimes getting a 0.5, you're going to get someone who is, has a lot of experience, who's maybe retired or whatever, and you're going to end up spending more anyway. And we need it.
What would be the effect if we said no to E but yes to what Heather's talking about. Almost no effect, right?
It'll be close
minimal,
to
because
neutral.
Recess supervisor is
No,
not a high
The
wage earner like a
PE,
certified
talking about
teacher.
the PE teacher, Clarence.
Yeah, I'm talking about E.
Okay,
A no on E and a yes to what Heather's talking about, which is an additional 0.5 on C.
So basically a $70,000 plug for music instead of a $40,000 plug for music, and you take out the increase in the PE.
Does it have to
I'd
be?
be for that.
I would go for that too, but does it have to be 70? I don't know.
I'm using round numbers based on my recollection of our previous conversations.
Probably a net increase of about 10.
Right. It would be ballpark close.
That would make me feel like we are doing a good job, actually.
You sound surprised,
like the
Heather.
past couple of years have been really depressing, cutting stuff that we didn't, like last year, we didn't know if we should cut it, we shouldn't cut it, we had no idea. The year before that, we were cutting everything. We cut library books. So this is being responsible, I think.
I see the cost for the new music teacher, the 0.5. I'm looking for the 0.4 PE teacher, but assuming they're on the same salary step scale, 0.4 to 0.5, it'll be slight difference, but nothing too dramatic. So you can make that swap reasonably.
I mean, that the PE teacher's already been there, so they probably maybe higher.
All right, I'd have to check with Vicky on the 0.4 because I'm not seeing it, and I know it's there. I'm just because probably the person exists. I don't know the person's name, so I can't figure out who it is. So I have to talk to Vicky about that. But that's a swap. That increase of that 0.4. I don't know how the building leaders feel about it, but that's can definitely be done.
Was there something on there about recess aides?
Yeah.
And now recess aides, is that something that's required? Is that like, I know a lot of schools have like parent volunteers who do that kind of thing. Is that something that we could consider? Maybe parents are so sick of their kids after this pandemic, they don't want, they're not going to be any volunteers.
So just from a cost standpoint, the recess supervisor is $8,160, and the 0.4 PE teacher to make that position whole is $21,047.
So I recall some history on why we have been reluctant in previous years to use volunteers for critical positions, which is that volunteers tend to not be as reliable as people who are hired to a position. And the recess is a situation where you really need to have someone you can depend on. And I'm not saying that our parent volunteers aren't dependable. They're wonderful. I am one. But for the staff that makes the school operate, it's in the past we have wanted to hire people.
You can't
I don't
cut
know
a volunteer's pay.
What's that?
You can't cut a volunteer's pay.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm also thinking, I'm second guessing that because I'm thinking about if you would want to do a background checks on people who are like regularly volunteering with kids. So
Yeah,
right. For $8,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either in or out.
Yeah, no, keep it in.
Let's not assume volunteers.
Hey, I want to point something out. I don't want to forget. If we go from a 0.5 to a 1.0 on the music teacher, it's not just a salary calculation. Do we need any benefits over and above that we need to change when you go from a 0.5 status?
The 0.5, they already have benefits, so it doesn't change anything.
Okay.
Maybe we get someone who's like 23 years old and on their parents' insurance.
I feel like Dr. Harrison's going to look forward to that job search.
He's going to appoint himself. Be careful.
Right.
I'm telling you. Oh, but that's at John Reed. I was going to say marching band. Then we get it all done, and then maybe they speak Latin.
So I do think I'm going to give a pitch for the PE teacher at RES. I do think that from a staff morale perspective, I do think that perhaps there may be some that review the staffing at RES and compare it to JRMS and see some inequity between how we staff PE in both buildings, like a 1.4 versus, I don't know, 4. I could look it up, but we have far more staff in the PE department at JRMS than RES. And I think that it is important, especially given, the sort of screen time kids have dedicated to learning, throughout the pandemic, that we really are properly funding and supporting physical education. I think it's very important. I think that the dollars that Dr. Harrison just shared with us is not a huge hit to the overall budget number. And I think it's important to treat our staff fairly.
Colleen, just
Couple of
to
things.
sort of.
I don't. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, hard to compare those two programs, with John Reed having, Project Adventure and RES not. But I'm not sure if it's a question of fairness. I know that it sounded like Natalie was going for equity in exactly the number of classes, but if that person is, in our employ and in the building, I'd like to have that person in front of students as much as possible. And if it's possible to handle, like Natalie said, they're going to get every student's going to get 2 classes of PE every week. I think we're in good shape. I think the need is greater for the music program at John Reed than it is to achieve some sort of equity among fine and practical arts in RES.
I also want to say that at John Reed, there is one music teacher for the whole school. That means kids can't take general music. That means there's not all the music programs that used to be offered. So it's apples and oranges. And I think that we're trying to make up for what was a real kind of an existing inequity in between those programs. But I hear you, Colleen, but I agree with Mike. I think we're good.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
You guys seem to be balancing the equities of a music versus a PE teacher. But right now, if you took out the 800,000 and the 30,000 for the smart boards, you're down to a 3.05. But that 3.05, if my memory serves correctly, has the music teacher in there and it has the PE teacher in there. So are you saying that?
Well, it doesn't have the full music teacher in it, though.
It has a 0.5 music teacher.
So you want to, so you're talking about, so Heather, you're talking about adding a 0.5 to that. Okay.
Right. We'll be proposing a full-on music teacher.
Okay, so you're adding, okay, got it.
We were going to net the additional 0.5 against not doing the 0.4 on the PE.
Okay, okay.
And you stay the same number, basically. But Colleen,
Can I just clarify something really quick? I'm not advocating picking and choosing. I want both. I am advocating for asking for what we need. I think that we want to be, our desire to be respected as a board. Sometimes we're also pretending to be our own board of finance. And I think it's really important for the community to hear from us what we need. And if we're cutting things because we're worried that we don't seem like responsible financial stewards, I think that some of the message is lost with our community year after year after year when we try to be our own board of finance. So I want music, I want PE, I think it's important. And I think it's also important for our community to hear what it is that we need.
Yeah, Colleen, I think it's important, a few points. One, the John Reed PE teachers also teach health and wellness in addition to Project Adventure and gym. So it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison. I don't want the community to think that we're just stacking the middle school with gym teachers. But in addition, this isn't a choice about whether to have a fully functioning PE program at RES or not. The result is today 2 roughly 30-minute gym classes per week versus next year roughly 2 30-minute gym classes per week. And so where I am less persuaded is what sort of the ROI is beyond, we don't want the teachers to have to teach more sections, basically.
Sounds to me like the inequity is within the teachers and not with the students.
Right. Which I'm sympathetic to, but is less persuasive, certainly, than let's restore a robust music program to the middle school that hasn't existed in a number of years at this point.
Right. I've not heard that kids are missing PE. Right? They're all having their regular 2 classes a week.
So can we look for, so with the PE, we're talking about $21,000. Is it worth going through and trying to scrub some more items out of smaller line items for that additional position? So I'm like Colleen, I'd like to have both. I mean, I think that where we are with the PE issue right now is that, well, it's not had an impact on kids or a significant impact on staff as of now. Remember, we're talking about adding an additional class to be taught. that would make the PE teachers' caseloads higher at RES next year, and just I just have concerns about the staffing inequities. Yes, it doesn't sort of shake out to students, but it could become a potential issue in the future. You know, one of the areas that we hadn't talked about, had some conversation with Jen about this, related to special ed, and that was looking at the compensatory ed line. We talked about this as a potential opportunity for us to relook at that number. Jen, can you remind us what's
Sure. If you look at the RES budget, you know, on the 1100 under section 114, there's a line and it says compensatory services for special education. That was originally put in because when COVID-19 first hit, there was big fear that parents would start coming after us for compensatory services. So I really think that this compensatory ed really, I think, should be part of a larger COVID discussion. I don't think it should be just pulled out and just put aside, because typically when we talk about compensatory ed, it usually involves a mediation or settlement, and there are ways that we can provide compensatory ed within other parts of our special services budget. So my suggestion would be that is probably something that we could look at to remove.
Can you tell me what number that was again in the budget?
It's under the general education, you know, the 1100, and it's 114.
And it's only in John Reed. It's not in RES. It's at 0 for RES.
No, it's on it was taken out of the RES. I mean, last year we had it in both RES and in John Reed, and it was removed from RES, and I'm proposing that we also remove it from John Reed.
What does that run?
It's $25,000 in 23, 1100, 114.
And that gets us the PE teacher?
Well, Mr. Chair, before you go there, I just went and added the 0.5 music teacher before you got the discussion. So that takes you to a 3.2% increase. So before you figure out, you got to decide whether 3.2 is acceptable for you. If it isn't, then we can talk about taking things out. But adding that 0.5 additional 0.5 music takes you to a 3.2% increase.
What's the actual dollar value of it?
722,650.5 and 59 cents. Well, I'll show my
No,
screen.
I'm talking about the 0.5.
Oh, it's 34,200.
Can I just say something? Dr. Harrison just said, should we scrub? So it is really important. So my impression of our community is that it is really important that we scrub. So is it worth it to scrub? Yes. And it might not actually result in a PE position, but our community is looking for assurance that the budget has, okay, my impression is our community is looking for assurance that this budget has been scrubbed. So yes, it is worth it.
Can I suggest that it seems to me like we're coming very, very close to a final number here, folks. And while I do not share Heather's passion for half a music teacher, it depends on which half, you know, I would go along with that in order to get to a number that we think is responsible. And I should say that given that we're looking now at slowly increasing enrollment and dealing with the impacts of COVID and providing adequate, acceptable class sizes and doing it for around a 3% increase all in, doesn't sound too bad to me. So again, I'm not gonna worry about half a music teacher, even though I don't agree with you, Heather, on particularly, but fine, I'll take it.
I just want to clarify that it's not half a music teacher. It's making a half a music teacher a whole teacher, which is a better teacher.
Which half? Which half?
The left half or the right half?
This
and I guess
music teacher better be great. This music teacher better be like Lin-Manuel Miranda in here.
We'll make them watch this board meeting as part of the interview process.
We'll make sure Dr. Rydell is part of the interview process, giving his music background.
Mike is trying to say something important, so
that's all right. Yeah, Chris Hawker, I agree. We are we're getting close here, but there's something else I want to talk about before it's done, and it's a big item, and Chris, what can we say anything about what the negotiating committee's been working on? I know we don't have an agreement, but I think we know where we could end up.
I mean, I'd be more comfortable recessing and having a non-meeting to talk about it for a few minutes.
It's and we'd have to invite Clarence for sure, and Rydell, but I wouldn't suggest this, folks, if it wasn't a big item. It's a big item. This is not the gym teacher.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Mike.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's cool that we can do that with this kind of meeting.
Right. So what we would need to do is
directly relevant.
It wouldn't be an executive session because it's an issue that pertains to collective bargaining. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is ask whether there are other questions for the building administration that we want them to answer, so that we're not keeping them here any later than is necessary.
And that would be Natalie,
Phyllis, and Joe, who I'm seeing wilt a little bit. So.
No.
All right, Gentle Conti, I feel like there are things that we'd probably want to keep her around for.
I do have just one question for Natalie, just because we had some discussion about this earlier, and to Colleen's point about just doing some additional scrubbing. And so we talked about the reduction of the garden club in a previous meeting. But since that the last meeting, Natalie and I also talked about the money in the budget for the math club and the reading club. This is 1126, the 24, 1126, 114. And the total amount between those two line items, 8840. Natalie, before we send you off to bed, do you want to just say a word about those two programs?
So the math and reading club, we had it in the budget for this year too, but we have not been running it for a variety of reasons. But it's an opportunity for children who may not be receiving the tiered supports through the SIP process, and they're not in special ed, but they can benefit from some additional support in literacy or math. It has been very beneficial over the years. I also know that when we're sitting and talking about as a building administrator, you don't want to get rid of anything because you present the budget. You say, when we hand it to you, we say, this is what we need and would like to have in order to best run the best building in Reading. Oh, sorry, Phyllis. I didn't mean that, Phyllis. You're the best building too. But that being said, now that we're at this point, so we have to look at what's the least impactful. Most impactful is what we've talked about up to this point. The class sizes, the teachers, the programs within our day. And this is one of those things that we were providing after the school day. They're attached to, so we have some staff who stay after school to work with the children. So it's an awesome program. But if I'm being asked now to start, as you guys are using the phrase scrubbing, I don't know about that, but scrubbing down, this is something that will allow us to keep our day and our family intact, which is very important to us. And this would be an after school opportunity that we would not have for next school year. And again, we're not doing it this school year either for a variety of reasons.
Can I ask if this is something that there could be fundraising for if somebody wanted to do fundraising, or are you not allowed to pay teachers who would run an after school program?
The problem is it is a salary statement, so it has to come out of our operating budget. We can't really pay teacher salaries with outside fund, donated funds.
But there could be there could be one at Park and Rec
or at the Mark Twain Library.
We're talking about how much? $8,800?
$8,840.
I mean, this is all about optics, right? This is all about, like, everyone's always saying, did you go through every single line?
And just so you know, we've already eliminated 2 clubs already from RES that came out of the budget that were there previously. So these are the last 2 remaining clubs.
And these aren't exactly clubs. What I'm hearing is that this is extra.
It's extracurricular, student account co-curricular is how it's labeled.
Yeah.
Quasi-intervention.
Yeah.
I'm not in a big hurry to scrub that one.
No. I'd rather raise funds for the flagpole at RES. That'd probably be easier. That's a couple thousand, right?
Well, and so I'm not going to share the picture with you, but we did take a picture of the flagpole today. It's a safety issue. So I know we're kind of being silly about it, but it really is a safety issue. We came in this morning and said, thank goodness the flagpole's still standing. So honestly, when you come by, take a look.
It was one of the questions that I asked, do we really need a new flagpole? And then I drove by and I was like, oh, wow, we need one.
It's a safety issue, and where it's leaning, if you saw, it's leaning towards where we have parents picking kids up.
Well, can we get that done now? Why don't we get that done now from this year's funds and take that out, because it's a safety issue.
Clarence?
And also it looks ridiculous.
So here's the thing. I can very easily take it down. That's not going to cost a lot. Getting it replaced, I got to spend some money. So if you guys are fine with getting it replaced, fine. Taking it down is not a problem. Replacing is a whole different issue.
Can't we replace it now?
We can, but once again, it goes to this point about if you're comfortable using, us, since they're, like I say, because of COVID, there's certain lines that we didn't spend because of COVID. This is why you have this sort of surplus. It's definitely a safety issue. I saw it myself. Matter of fact, when I go to RES, I make sure I park away from the flagpole because I usually park there in the front.
And
I don't have to file a claim for myself. To like, why is the finance director filing claims against the school?
How much is that in the budget? 2,400 or something?
I'd have to go. Let me see where it is.
We could have Verizon put one of those up.
Yeah, one that makes money, a generating income one.
2236.
2236.
Fix it.
It also, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it. It's like in italics. It's.
Right. I think this relates back to my comment about the pipes. It's broken. We fix it. It's maintenance.
Did we ever get the floor scrubber?
I don't want to talk about the floor scrubber or the drum or anything. No. Yeah, I would have no problem getting the flagpole fixed as a necessity for a safety reason right now.
Literally went on Amazon and was like, how much is a flagpole?
So we can take 2236 out of the budget and reduce it from a 3.2% to a 3.2% increase. And so is there anything else for Natalie or Phyllis or Joe?
Yes.
I want to be respectful of their time.
Yes, I'm so sorry. 23, 1100, 1119641. It has the word placeholder next to it, and I just I don't want any of those left. I want to know for sure.
What was the function again?
I don't know which number is the
Are
function.
you looking at the fifth grade textbook, 641?
Yes.
Yeah, there's $20,000 in his fifth grade new textbook adoption under science math. It's 231119 641.
So I'm guessing that number has been adjusted.
Okay.
Hold on. You
Clarence
said
would have the exact figure, but that
23?
number was a placeholder.
It's 231119 641.
1119.
The fifth grade portion of the K-5 text.
That's still showing up as 20,000. So if there's been some change, I wasn't aware of it.
Right, so that needs to be adjusted because it's just the sort of 1/6 of the total amount of the math textbook purchase. It's just for grade 5.
So
It is grade 5.
you want to give me a number, a rough?
So if the number came down 50,000 overall because we were splitting into 3 buckets, then this should come down so that it only reflects 1/6 of what's left. So if what was left was 40,000, this should be either 1/6 of it or 0 if the whole thing was carried in the RES side.
Yeah, and I think it's even lower than that, honestly.
I think there might be math textbooks listed somewhere else as well.
Right. The math textbook should be primarily in RES. That's the platform
At RES.
that Clarence gave us the new number on that
Correct.
netted out 50,000 earlier.
So if I divide the 20,000 by 6, it comes out to be $3,300 and change. So you want to go with that number? Stephanie, I don't know, because I'm not familiar what the need is, but.
Well, Clarence, what is left in RES when we said we took out 48,000, whatever it was, to the math, so we know what payment 2 out of 3 is. If we know what payment 2 out of 3 is in a whole, and we're carrying that in RES, it kind of doesn't matter. It could be zeroed here, or it could be divided 6 ways and 5/6 in RES and
No,
1/6.
just so you know, the math program, we're starting it this year. We had this pre-discussed. We're paying $20,000 this year to start the PD this year.
Yeah.
We're paying 34 and change next fiscal year, and then 34 and change the following fiscal year.
Right. So the 34 and change next year is the total.
Yes.
And 1/6 of it should be carried here, and 5/6 of it should be carried at RES. But
Okay,
if
so
34 is accounted for at RES right now, then this can be zeroed for the purposes of our conversation.
okay.
Did I just pay for Jim?
That was a great catch, Pilato. That was very good.
So I've zeroed it out.
All right.
So 119, 641, 20,000. Let me go add that to the running total.
This is calculations, Mr. Chairman. Can we take a 5-minute break too once we go into that session?
Yeah, I want to make sure we bottomed out everything that we need from
No, understood.
building administration. Yeah. But if there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to recess. And what we would do is hold a non-meeting in a breakout room and then come back. Hopefully.
Make that motion.
Second.
I'm sorry, Clarence?
Taking out the 20,000 and adding the 0.5 for the music teacher brings you down to a 3.11.
All right, thank you. And Mike has made a motion to recess subject to call of the chair, and John has seconded it. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection? All in favor, aye.
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 Any objections? Hearing none, we are going to stand in recess at 10:51 p.m. And what I'm going to do is turn the live stream off in a moment. We will take the board, Dr. Harrison and Mr. Zachary, into a breakout room for the non-meeting, and then we'll return to this space, hopefully in